Chapter 12 Rage for a Beautiful Woman. This box should have been given to Wang Fei a long time before, but it was just that when Wang Fei was getting married, it was forgotten in the rush. Liang Shi gave the box to Mu Jin. Seeing Chu Qingju take the sandalwood box from Mu Jin, she continued in a choked-up voice, "I've been keeping it these past years, waiting to give it to you one day." The purple color of the sandalwood looked aged, but there was still a faint scent when held in one's hands. A gold lock was formed into the shape of a cloud. The lock had been opened already. Chu Qingju only had to lift the lid to see what was inside. The hand that held the lid paused slightly. In a deep part of her soul, she felt the strong desire of this body towards the box. She could feel the hate and helplessness of a neglected and helpless little girl. Slowly opening the box, inside there was high-quality cloth laid out, and on top of the cloth was a single jade pendant. Fine mutton fat jade had been carved into the shape of a gourd. The shape of peanuts were carved finely onto the gourd along with the words, "Live for 100 years." Her heart jumped, and a length of memory, like a movie scene, floated to the top of her mind. The original Chu Qingju had always wanted to get this jade gourd from Liang Shi, but Liang Shi deliberately kept it away. Now she was, of her own initiative, handing it over and pretending to be a good person in front of so many people. She was most likely scared that Chu Qingju was going to act against her in the future. Jejia had somebody prepare this jade gourd very early that year, but Jejia passed away. In the rush, the jade store sent the pendant to me. As Liang Shi talked, her eyes reddened. Jejia died too young. Her only concern was you, Wang Fei. In the past, I was worried that Wang Fei was too young and would lose what Jejia had left you, so I kept it for you. Now that Wang Fei has grown up, this jade gourd should be given into Wang Fei's care. She scanned Chu Qingju up and down and said ruefully, "Seeing what Wang Fei looks like now, Jejia in heaven will be happy." She lifted a hand to take out the jade gourd pendant. The feel of it was warm and smooth. Because it was carved to be small, there wasn't much weight to it. It was possible to see that Tian Shi had wanted to, at Chu Qingju's 100-day celebration, put the gourd on her body. The nobility had the fashion of giving children a 100-day celebration. When the child reached 100 days, the elders would personally put on the child charms for a long life. Most of the charms would have magic clouds and peanuts and other objects of good fortune along with the words, "to live until 100 years." This was to symbolize locking down a person's life and that the gods would protect the child to live 100 years. Pity the love of mothers in this world. Tian Shi died so young. The rumors outside said that she became ill due to anger, but a woman that, at the very end, still ordered for her child a jade gourd, would she be so weak as to die due to anger? Mothers grow strong in protection of their children. Tian Shi wasn't the type to fall into sadness. Would she not care for her newborn daughter and get so angry as to die? Very early in life, I heard Gao Mama say, not long after my birth, Mother had ordered a jade gourd pendant for my 100-day gift. But sadly, 10 years ago Mother made Gao Mama retire, and I never even once saw the jade gourd that Mama mentioned. I didn't think that Mother had been keeping it for me all this time. The hand that held the gourd tightened. Chu Qingju, in front of the females present, put the jade gourd on her neck, her eyes reddening, as a daughter. I troubled my mother to be pregnant for 10 months. Even into death, my mother was concerned for me. The fact that I could not reciprocate, it is a failure of my filial piety. In the previous life, her parents had died early in a car crash, but until the last moment, they had been thinking about her. Seeing this jade gourd pendant, she felt her heart twist and felt that the people of this Chang de Gong Fu was extremely disgusting, to the point of throwing up if she had to look at them. Wang Fei, seeing the situation, Mu Jin gazed worriedly at Chu Qingju, but she was a servant and couldn't freely comfort her. When the child wants to show filial love, the parents are not there. Chu Qingju stood, looking at the smiling Liang Shi. The emotions on her face gradually faded and her face became expressionless. The care that Mother has given Qingju will never forget in this life. In the future, Qingju will definitely return the benevolence that Mother has given in the past. Chu Lao Taidai had been feeling uneasy the entire time, and seeing Chu Qingju was speaking so clearly, she couldn't keep the genial expression up on her face. She wanted to speak to ease the tension, but she didn't manage in time. Today is Father's birthday, and I should stay a bit longer. But there are many things to do in the Wang Fu, so I have to leave. Chu Qingju bent slightly towards Chu Lao tie-dye. This granddaughter makes her farewells. Foreign, we will meet in the future. Everybody saw that Duan Wang Fei's face was nothing to worry about, but they didn't make her stay. Liang Shi, this stepmother, did things in such an unsightly manner that Duan Wang Fei couldn't endure any longer. Not just Duan Wang Fei, but all children in this world. If they had to face such things, they couldn't endure. Chu Lao tie-dye couldn't sit any longer and could only stand to personally send away Chu Qingju. Duan Wang Fei, whose mother had died early, at the birthday banquet of her father, didn't stay to watch the plays but left with red eyes. If this passed into the ears of others, this entire Chang de Gong Fu, what honor would they have left? Everybody else stood to see her off, but when they reached the outside hall, Chu Qingju stopped them. Her white face held a smile. All the foreign don't have to be so courteous. On another day, I will invite all of you to a gathering. Everybody accepted. Chu Lao tie-dye still wanted to walk a bit further, but Chu Qingju stopped her. She smilingly said, "Grandmother is old now. We can't let you send off your granddaughter, otherwise granddaughter would be unfilial." Finishing, she ordered Mu Jin, who was by her side, "Send somebody to give word to Wang Yi. I'm going to return first." Chu Lao tie-dye had no other way but to see Chu Qingju leave. She turned to look coldly at Liang Shi, and for the first time ever, she held on to Shu daughter Chu Hui Shui's hand to return to the play. The common people said to marry a wife was to marry virtue. The Duke of Changde, now that he had this woman, Liang Shi, sooner or later he would lose everything. Once Chu Qingju left, many of the womenfolk that had come to attend the banquet who had done so due to Duan Wang Fu stood and made their farewells. In less than an hour, more than half of the female guests left. On the side of the male guests, He Hong, as a Wang Yi, naturally sat on the seat of the honored guests. The person sitting beside him was Chu Wangji. He didn't have any interest in honoring others, so he didn't pay any attention to any others. But even so, there were still many people that came up to fawn over him. An act of Magu giving her birthday greetings hadn't finished when Qianchang Xian had came over to Duan Wang's side and spoke a few words. Chu Wangji, who had been sitting behind Duan Wang, faintly heard the words, "Wang Fei." What? Duan Wang's brows slightly creased. The face that had originally carried a friendly, if polite, smile froze. He placed the teacup in his hands on the table, the flower teacup making a crisp sound. The Duke of Changde, who had been paying attention to this side, felt his heart skip a beat. He didn't know what had enraged Wang Yi. Others pretended to casually look towards Duan Wang. The way that Changde Gong Fu treats their guests has really widened the horizons of Bin Wang. Duan Wang smiled frigidly as he stood. "Qianchang Xian, let's leave." Wang Yi, the Duke of Changde, knew that something had gone majorly wrong and hurriedly came up to make his apologies. But He Hong didn't even give him a glance but said coldly, "Bin Wang came today to accompany Wang Fei and knew that the Duke of Changde was very much in mutual love with his wife. But Bin Wang's Wang Fei, she is still the Duke's daughter. This Fu has treated her so. Is it that my Duan Wang Fu is being looked down at?" Finishing, he didn't wait for the Duke of Changde to respond and swept away. The Darren, that had been present paused for a beat before managing to respond. Many of them had heard the past events of Changde Gong Fu, but everyone were male, so they hadn't paid attention to this type of things. But they didn't think that Changde Gong Fu's people would be this ludicrous. It didn't matter just how the servants had treated the deceased Tian Shi's daughter originally in this Fu, but she was Duan Wang Fei now. Treating her rudely was treating Duan Wang rudely. Wasn't this akin to slapping Duan Wang in the face over and over? Even if Duan Wang was friendlier than Rui Wang, he wouldn't tolerate such disrespect. It seems that this Changde Gong Fu was more and more foolish. Everybody stood and made their farewells, not caring how terrible the face of the Duke of Changde looked. They had made Wang Yi angry enough to leave, so why would they say? Or did they have to tell Duan Wang, "Wang Yi, you go be angry by your lonesome. We're good friends with the Duke of Changde and still want to stay here with the Duke to drink tea and watch plays?" The Duke of Changde was foolish, but they weren't. At this time, it was best to leave early. They had to pity the Duan Wang couple for coming to attend the celebration, but were provoked by dumb people into leaving earlier. The busy birthday banquet instantly became silent and cold. The Duke of Changde threw the teacup in his hands to the floor. Hearing the iya of the voices on the stay, he felt even more furious and shouted angrily, "Why are you still singing? Get off!" "Father," Chu Wangji worriedly supported him. "Don't be angry. Think about your body." "I don't need a body." The Duke didn't bear to push aside his only son, so he threw another teacup. "Go ask your mother. What happened to make Duan Wang this angry?" Chu Wangji looked at the servants standing in the surroundings and felt that it wasn't good for father to mention his mother, so he persuaded. "At this time, grandmother and mother must be in Hoyuan. We could go ask together." Liang Rong, who had seen the guests off, stood to one side and also urged, "We don't know what happened. Uncle shouldn't be angry. Responding after we know what happened wouldn't be too late." The Duke of Changde managed to force down his anger and, with an ashen face, walked into Hoyuan. When he entered the carriage, he saw his Wang Fei's eyes were slightly red and had been visibly unhappy. The rage he had suppressed originally rose again. "Wang Fei, who hurt you? Tell Bin Wang. Bin Wang will help you take revenge." Chu Qingju raised her head to look at him. Seeing the rage in his eyes wasn't fake, she said, "Nobody can hurt Duan Wang Fei, but it's just sadness from remembering the past. I accompanied you today just so I could support you. You don't have to be ashamed, thinking," he added, "not just today and the future. Other than those few in the palace, you don't have to yield to anyone." Finished speaking, he found that on Chu Qingju's neck, there was a new addition of a fine jade gourd and looked twice. "Isn't Wang Yi afraid that Xie would be arrogant in her acts in the future and ruin Duan Wang Fu's reputation?" Chu Qingju touched the jade gourd at her chest, the warm feeling making her smile. "Wang Fei isn't such an ignorant woman." He moved his gaze aside, smiling happily. "Moreover, if it was you, Qingju, arrogance is not a disadvantage." Two pairs of eyes met. Chu Qingju gradually moved aside her gaze, revealing a warm smile. These words, who believed them? I. Adult, general term used to refer to those of status /n. Chapter 13. Jing Fei's summons. What had occurred at Changde Fu did make its way through the aristocratic circles of the city of Jing. The type of people that Jing City never lacked for were officials and nobility. When the incident spread, the Duke of Changde couldn't bear to go out to hear the mockery in other people's words. Every time he went to court, he rushed as fast as he could home after it ended. Last time, he had gone to Hoyuan to ask Liang Shi what had happened. The result was that he had saw Liang Shi sobbing her heart out in her room. He knew that it was hard to be a stepmother. Now that Diyatu was a Wang Fei, Liang Shi could only respect her. She had to endure it even if she was annoyed. She was victimized. They were all daughters of Changde Fu. Why was it that Sanyatu was so considerate and sensible, but Diyatu was this senseless? If her paternal home was shamed, she, as a married daughter, wouldn't be well off either. Liang Rong was walking in the courtyards and saw his aunt's husband furiously marching past. He quickly retreated and bowed to the Duke of Changde. The Duke wasn't in the mood to pay him any attention, so he nodded and strode away. This made Liang Rong to look longer at him. "Gongzi, 1. What's going on with Gu Laoyi too?" The manservant that followed him said worriedly. His face didn't look so good. Thinking of the rumors these past days in Jing City, Liang Rong furrowed his brow. Because of the separation of the sexes, he hadn't had many interactions with his cousin in name, Chu Qingju. But in his memories, every time he saw her, she always preferred to lower her head and didn't speak. How did things get this bad? With Aunt's nature and skills, how come she couldn't manage the little girl? Now the reputation of Changde Fu wasn't good, and in passing, people were saying to not marry any daughters of the Liang family. This had ruined the reputations of the sisters in his home, and he felt somewhat insecure. The person they offended this time wasn't somebody ordinary, but the second imperial son Duan Wang. It wouldn't be very easy to suppress the gossip. But he had heard before that Rui Wang's mother Xu Fei and Duan Wang's mother Jin Fei did not get along. If they could get the support of Rui Wang, things would be much easier to accomplish. Furthermore, the present emperor was old, and all the imperial sons had reached adulthood. The emperor's favorite was Rui Wang. Recently, The rumors had been saying that the emperor was going to establish Rui Wang as Taizi. 3. If that was true, then supporting Rui Wang would cause no harm and create many advantages. Chu Qingju, after hearing the jokes that Huang Yang had heard about Changde Gong Fu, was in a mood good enough that she ate an extra half bowl of rice at noon. In the afternoon, she rewarded all the servants in the Zhangyuan. Wang Fei's actions made everybody in Zhangyuan feel confused and worried. Logically, Wang Fei should be angry, but why did it not look like that? There were some that asked Huang Yang, but while Huang Yang looked young, his brains were very quick and not one word could be pried from him. Chu Qingju didn't care about what the servants did and absolved the other Cheshire of paying their respects in the next 2 days. She concentrated on combing through the memories that remained of the original in the body. These memories weren't hers and in her heart, they were like scenes of a movie. She would remember them, but she wouldn't be involved in them. After she managed to organize everything, Chu Qingju had nothing to do except eat, read, and look at flowers until a mama from Zhongjing Palace, 4, came. The mistress of Zhongjing Place was Duan Wang's mother Jing Fei, and this mama had come to convey Jing Fei's words. The meaning was that she had heard that her Erxifu 5 had recovered, and as her Mu Fei, she missed her, so she was to, along with the 2 Si Fei, go tomorrow to Zhongjing Palace to visit. Basically, it was that Jing Fei saw that her Erxifu hadn't been to pay respects to her for a long time and felt uncomfortable inside. In this era, if the Popo 6 didn't make something difficult for her Erxifu, it wouldn't be fair to when she had been an Erxifu and the way she was treated in that time. There were more liberal Popos, but she wasn't very lucky, and such a thing of good fortune hadn't occurred to her. Since Mu Fei wanted a meeting, she, as her Erxifu, had to follow the wishes of her elders. She sent 2 Yahuan to notify the 2 Si Fei of the event, and Chu Qingju put the event aside. At night when He Hong came to Zhangyuan, he picked up the topic with Chu Qingju. I heard that Mu Fei wanted to see you tomorrow? After the two flipped the red waves, they laid calmly in the blankets. He Hong spoke as if he just thought of it. You've been sick for more than a month, so you had no way of going to the palace to pay respects. That wasn't your fault. The gifts, I've gotten Qiancheng Xian to prepare it already. Tomorrow after court, I'll also go to Mu Fei's palace, so you don't have to worry about anything else. Chu Qingju reached out with her index finger and wrapped a lock of He Heng's hair around her finger, making a sound of assent. In the memories, this Jing Fei hadn't been very satisfied with her as an Erxifu, but because it had been a marriage bestowed by the emperor, she had barely managed to go through the formalities. But even so, in her actions and words, there was still the hint of disdain. The original, in the memories, had been very frightened of Jing Fei. It had seemed that every time she went into the palace, her heart had been in her throat. Now Duan Wang was saying these words. Did he want to reassure her? No matter how much truthfulness was in these words, Chu Qingju accepted his goodwill. What is it? Still unhappy? He Hong heard the apathy in her voice and tightened his embrace. Looking at her fine brows, he teased, Bin Wang can protect you. Are you still unhappy? Mu Fei is Wang Ye's birth mother. She wouldn't be too harsh on Xie. Chu Qingju raised her head to look at He Hong and sighed. Xie knows that Mu Fei isn't very happy with Xie's own family. This can't be blamed on Mu Fei. Even Xie is helpless against the people of that family. Before the emperor decreed the wedding, Xie hadn't even dared to think of marrying into the imperial family. She reached out with a hand to encircle Duan Wang's neck. Luckily, Wang Yi hasn't abandoned Xie because of Changde Gong Fu, and is protecting Xie in all matters. Xie is a lucky woman. He Heng's eyes moved away from his stare with Chu Qingju's gaze and tightly clutched the person to him. It is because Wang Fei is very good, Bin Wang protects you. You have no connection to that entire Chu family. The person I married is you, not the Chu family. How absurd they are, I don't care. As long as they don't bully you, I will pretend to not see them. Wang Yi, Chu Qingju buried her head into the space of He Heng's neck. When He Hong was speaking, he didn't dare look at her eyes. It seemed somebody had a guilty conscience. There wasn't anybody of note in Changde Gong Fu, but that wasn't the same with the Tian clan of Xiangqing Ho Fu. Even if the Tian family didn't have the power to oppose the court, they were still a first-rate family in Jing City. And the entire Tian clan treated her very well. Duan Wang couldn't have missed that fact. All right, don't think too much. Sleep early. He hung gently patted Chu Qingju's back as though he was soothing a baby into sleep. He didn't have much affection for Tian Shi in the beginning, so after the marriage, he had kept her on ice. He had let the servants serve her with respect because of the Tian family behind her, but in the encounters of these recent days, he had found that Chu Shi wasn't an insipid and tasteless woman. He wasn't the type of man to favor a Chia over a wife. He wanted to interact more with his Zhengfei and gradually build some positive emotion. Even if they didn't reach affection as deep as the sea, they had to get to mutual respect. Chu Qingju wasn't just a beautiful woman. Her words and actions were very attractive to him as a man, so the more they interacted, the more satisfied he felt with her. He wanted to treat her even better. Even if the words he spoke weren't all true, but it still expressed more or less represented his desires. The two fell asleep in an embrace. Undoubtedly, both had very different thoughts, but their position was as though they were the most intimate lovers in the world, displaying a beautiful sleeping posture. Chu Qingju woke up very early on the second morning. After breakfast, she changed on to a majestic crimson trailing dress embroidered with round flowers. Using fake hair, she made a Faxian knot. She picked the finest and most beautiful hair ornaments and jewelry to wear, the exact opposite of the plainness in the past. She wore whatever she found pleasing to the eye. As to whether Jing Fei would like it, she just wanted to say, if you didn't like somebody, even their breathing was wrong. If you can't please somebody else, then please yourself. Putting on the pearl-embroidered shoes, Chu Qingju stood, the jewel over the middle of her forehead slightly swaying. Let's go. Are the two Si Fei ready yet? The two Si Fei are already waiting. Yuzan came front to support Chu Qingju. The carriage is ready. Wang Fei, do you want to leave now? It's about time. It'll take the better half of an hour to go from here to Zhongjing Place. Send somebody to call the two Si Fei. It was just going to the palace, but Jing Fei had to call the two Si Fei as well. She really was honoring this Wang Fei. Feng Zijin and Jiang Yongyu had been waiting early by the gate of Zhangyuan. Seeing Wang Fei come out, the two first paused before bowing to Chu Qingju. Chu Qingju scanned the two. Jiang Yongyu's clothing was the most proper it could get. It wasn't eye-catching, but it displayed her identity as a Si Fei. What Feng Zijin wore was much brighter. The pink of the girdle dress made her seem young and fresh. The two Si Fei were a bit surprised. The last few times Wang Fei had went into the palace, what she had worn had been the most proper with no distinguishing features. She was dressed so beautifully today that the two didn't manage to react for a period of time. Those rounded flowers were embroidered, looked as though they were alive. It was shoe embroidery. It probably had taken a long time to make the dress. And that water droplet forehead jewel made from a red ruby, the dark gold string braided in the hair so that the jewel sat perfectly in the middle of the forehead. Every move had the onlooker feel it was extraordinarily beautiful. Wang Fei was wearing this to the palace. Wasn't she afraid that Jing Fei Nyang would say she was too extravagant? Not caring what the two, though, Chu Qingju took a few yahuan and walked to the front. After she sat on the carriage in the front, the two Si Fei climbed into a carriage in the back before the second-rank yahuan that was coming along finally expressed her awe. What Wang Fei was wearing today was beautiful. No wonder Wang Yi liked going to Zhangyuan recently. When the carriages reached the palace doors, they couldn't go any further. Chu Qingju stepped on a Taijian's back to get off the carriage. She looked at the black stone path that stretched long ahead of her and the tall red walls beside the path. She couldn't resist raising her head and look at the cloudless blue sky. Feng Zijin stepped on the Taijian's back to climb down and saw the Taijian that was kneeling by Chu Qingju's carriage. She lightly snorted. A few days earlier, Wang Fei had slipped on a Taijian's back when stepping off a carriage, so she didn't favor using Taijian as a footstool anymore. But now they were in the palace. She acted according to the protocols of the imperial family. She had assumed that she would be much more courageous. Jiang Yongyu calmly glanced at Feng Zijin and sped up to stand behind Chu Qingju. It irritated Feng Zijin, who snorted again before following in her footsteps. At one, son of an official or nobility, also a title of respect for young men. 2. Husband of a daughter when referred to by a servant. The servant is from the wife's side, with Gu being the in-law. 3. Crown prince. 4. Zhong can mean clock, time, or a goblet. Jing means bright, circumstance, or scenery. 5. Wife of a son, daughter-in-law, 6, mother-in-law, husband's mother /n. Chapter 14. A pig for an opponent? The imperial palace of the Delong dynasty had been rebuilt on the foundations of the previous dynasty's palace. At the beginning, when the members of the He family had overturned the despot of the previous dynasty, they had taken care of many of the licentious yet famous and powerful families. So when they furnished their imperial palace, they tried to go the route of simple yet grand. Chu Qingju followed the guidance of the palace girl as she walked forward. She passed by one grand building after another. No matter how frugal the founding emperor had been, while the present Delong dynasty's excess were not equal to the lavishness of the previous dynasty, but it was still beautiful clothing, delicious food, and amusement abound. Duan Wang Fei, please walk this way. The person leading the way was a palace maid that had a rank and was of some use to Jing Fei. This palace maid's attitude, from the calm one when they came, had instantly changed around and put herself in a low position. From a little palace maid to her present position, her most important asset had been a pair of perceptive eyes. From her first look of Duan Wang Fei today, she had understood. Duan Wang Fei was different than before. Regardless of whether Nyang did or didn't like Duan Wang Fei, she was only a palace maid and didn't have the courage to offend this kind of a Duan Wang Fei. She respectfully guided them into the entrance of Zhongjing Palace and retreated to one side to allow Ding Mama, who served by Nyang side, to take them inside. The high-quality yun brocade slid soundlessly across the smooth ground. She looked at the red of the dress and dazedly raised her head. She could only see, against the light, that red shadow walked each step steadily and calmly. Wang Fei and the 2C Fei, please sit. Nyang would come out soon. Ding Mama directed the little palace maid to serve tea and personally placed a cup of tea in front of Chu Qingju. She smiled and said, "This old servant congratulates Wang Fei for a successful recovery. Ding Mama is too courteous." Chu Qingju sat on the chair and held out her hand to falsely help her up. It was due to the good fortune of Mu Fei and Wang Yi. These days, I haven't been able to come to Mu Fei's side and serve. It was unfilial of me as an Erxifu. Nyang wasn't angry but concerned. It was all my fault. Ding Mama's gaze fell onto the blood-red bangle resting on that porcelain wrist. She smiled, bowed, and said, Niang knew it was because Wang Fei's body wasn't well. She wouldn't be angry over such a small matter. For Wang Fei's body to get better, that was what Nyang really wishes for. Chu Qingju smiled and lowered her head slightly. This Ding Mama was a trusted confidant of Jing Fei. She always had a smile on her face, and the feeling people had upon seeing her was friendly. Even the original Chu Qingju had liked her very much. But when she had met her today, she felt that this Ding Mama wasn't a simple character. There were no simple women in this imperial palace. Ding Mama had been by Jing Fei's side for many years and was the most trusted and relied upon. Her attribute couldn't be this friendliness. Beside the venerable Jing Fei, there couldn't be simple people. I caused Mu Fei to worry. Chu Qingju sighed, her expression slightly pained as she said, I was heavily ill these past days. I had thought thankfully I recovered. Ding Mama had heard the news that Duan Wang Fei almost didn't make it. At the time, she had, on behalf of Nyang, left the palace to bestow many gifts. No wonder Duan Wang Fei was drastically different than in the past. She probably had been frightened by that illness. People, when they walked past death's threshold, they would understand many things. Seeing Wang Fei right now, she probably understood a lot. Wang Yi had favored her recently. There had been news from others that said Wang Yi had been residing day after day in Zhangyuan. Looking at her appearance, she did have the capital to attract men. Wang Fei has plenty of good fortune and naturally could overcome the misfortunes. Ding Mama smiled as she received the words. Hearing noise from outside the door, she closed her mouth and moved over. Chu Qingju turned her head to look. She saw a beautiful matron wearing an orange palace dress, supporting herself with one hand on a Taijian's hand, calmly walk in. The beautiful matron looked like she was just over 30 years old. Even if her face was rather mediocre, it couldn't disguise the allure between her brows. This was Jing Fei. Chu Qingju stood and went forward. Erxi greets Mu Fei. The 2C Fei stood behind her and followed with the greeting, but they referred to themselves as Nu, No need for courtesy, sit down. Jing Fei's steps slowed as she looked at Chu Qingju from top to bottom. She sat at the front and took a sip of the tea that Ding Mama presents. Seeing the three sit down, she opened again. Bin Gong too. Heard that Qingju's body has recovered and wanted to take a look. Seeing you now, I feel that your face looks much better than before. This bright red cotton trailing yun brocade dress is complicated and lavish. Most people can't wear it. You wear it well. Erxi thanks Mu Fei for the compliment. Chu Qingju looked at Jing Fei with eyes full of childish admiration. Erxi hadn't dared to wear it originally, but thought that this color was celebratory and of good fortune. Erxi had just recovered from a big sickness, and it is much better to be celebratory when coming to pay respects to Mu Fei. Thankfully, Mu Fei also likes what Erxi is wearing, otherwise Erxi wouldn't know what to do. Feng Zijin, sitting to one side, felt her mouth slightly quiver. Nyang Yang was implying that she dressed too lavishly. Was Chu Qingju really stupid, or pretending to be stupid that she really believed that Nyang Yang was complimenting her? The hand that held the teacup slightly stopped. The motion Jing Fei did to set down the teacup seemed to be heavier than normal. She looked with a normal expression at Chu Qingju. Seeing her smile happily, she asked, "Clothing isn't important. What is important is the intention. Bin Gong heard yesterday that you had been unhappy with your family, Changde Gong Fu. This thing has spread all over Jing City. What really happened?" "There's this thing?" Chu Qingju's eyes widened and she said in confusion, "What are they saying in Jing City?" "Ding Mama, you tell Wang Fei." Jing Fei took a sip of tea to suppress that bit of agitation inside. As a Wang Fei, you have to know some things about Jing City. Otherwise, how could you be Wang Ye's good wife? 3. Chu Qingju, upon hearing this, stood to beg for forgiveness. It is Erxi's fault. These past days have been filled with managing the Hoyuan and neglected to pay attention to the happenings outside the Fu. Mu Fei, please set a punishment. Jing Fei felt the roots of her teeth seem to ache. These words just didn't seem right. In the Delong dynasty, it wasn't as restricting towards women as it had been in the previous dynasty, but it was still men on the outside, women inside. What was forgetting to pay attention to happenings outside the Fu? Did she, her popo, have to tell her Erxifu to meddle with things outside the Fu? Facing the feeling of powerlessness in this chicken-talking-to-duck conversation, Jing Fei, in the end, could only push the teacup further away. In her understanding of Chu Qingju of the past, this Erxi didn't dare disobey her. So what she had said before, she wasn't suspicious, but when she heard the words, her heart felt like it was blocked up. Your body wasn't well the past days. It was correct to manage the Hoyuan these 2 days. Jing Fei smiled and let Chu Qingju sit before dismissing Ding Mama from reciting the story. It isn't a major thing. Mu Fei wouldn't punish you. Really, this incident doesn't have too much connection to you. It was Changde Gong Fu's behavior that was lacking. It just spread to you. Such a good Erxifu. To say bad things about the home of the married Erxi, wasn't this putting her Erxi's face to the floor and stomping on it? It was a pity that Chu Qingju didn't think of Changde Gong Fu as her home. She wasn't pained or tickled by Jing Fei's words, so just pretend that she didn't really care. Mu Fei has treated Erxi so well. Erxi doesn't know what to do. Chu Qingju, deeply moved, looked at Jing Fei. Erxi had obtained some little playthings these past days, and wanted to let Mu Fei play with them too. Hopefully Mu Fei wouldn't dislike them. What was this deeply moved and then giving gifts? Do you know that Bin Gong is criticizing you? Do you know Bin Gong looks down at you? Do you know that this is Bin Gong being unsatisfied with you? What are you moved about? Jing Fei inhaled, smiled and said, Come, you don't give stuff. As long as you are all fine, Mu Fei is satisfied. Have to be calm. Bin Gong is Jing Fei. Bin Gong is the high and noble Jing Fei. Chu Qingju saw that the smile on Jing Fei's face become warmer and warmer. The childish admiration on her own face became even more visible. Wang Yi and Erxi live outside the place and cannot express our filial love daily to Mu Fei. But we thought that these little amusements could make Mu Fei happier. If Mu Fei is happy, it is the best thing for Wang Yi and Erxi. Feng Zijin saw the harmonious situation in front of her and felt disappointed. Didn't Nyang Yang not like Chu Qingju as her Erxi? Why was she smiling brighter and brighter? And these gifts, did Nyang Yang like them that much that Nyang Yang was that happy? In the past, What Chu Qingju had presented wasn't simple, but Nyang Nyang hadn't given a hint of a smile then. The most painful thing in the world wasn't being pointed at and scolded indirectly, but you pointing at somebody and scolding indirectly, but the person didn't understand and assumed that you were complimenting her. Jing Fei had lived in the imperial palace for many years and was used to words that took 9 curves and 18 turns. And her opponents were the most skilled. Suddenly meeting a pig four of an opponent, she finally understood the pain of a punch landing in cotton. Or was it that the dull personality of Chu Qingju had been a pretense, and she was purposefully acting this way today to make her angry? Jing Fei's eyes narrowed, and she couldn't help but carefully examine Chu Qingju. After the examination, she suddenly fell. This Urxifu of hers had a pretty good appearance, and her smile was very inviting. Remembering when the emperor had just decreed the marriage, the dull look when the Duchess of Changde took her into the palace to give thanks, Jing Fei couldn't help but furrow her brows and look at Chu Qingju's present appearance. She didn't know the emperor had listened to the persuasions of which whore in this Hogong to want to bestow Chu Qingju to her son. He kept on saying that this girl's 8 words carried good fortune. After loudly formalizing the arrangement, he had no shame and said to her, he had given Hunger a good wife. She really didn't know how bad his eyes were to see a dead fish's eye as a pearl. Automatically blaming this onto her rival Xu Fei, Jing Fei came back from her thoughts. She tilted her head as she gazed at Chu Qingju. Originally, she had wanted to keep dealing blows at the other, but that desire had retreated. There was no taste to playing music at the cow. Zhang Yongyu had been keeping her head down and drinking tea. She raised her head to look at Jing Fei, and then at Wang Fei with a smile on her face, and then silently lowered her head. Instantly, the room sank into a strange sort of silence. But this silence was only a quick instant because the Taijian outside made an announcement that broke the silence. Duan Wang has arrived. The palace maids and Taijian serving inside the room took a breath as though something terrifying just disappeared. They silently moved their heads lower towards the door. Today the magic clouds on the soft palace boots that Duan Wang wore today were so good-looking. Chapter 15. The Women of the Imperial Palace. When He Hung entered the room with a smile, he bowed to Jing Fei immediately. After Jing Fei allowed his to rise, he walked to sit next to Chu Qingju and took a sip of tea before inquiring, "What has Mu Fei been talking to them about?" Jing Fei looked at the yun brocade golden-bordered robe of a Qin Wang, and with a cheerful expression said, "What can women say? It's just little things. Why are you so thirsty? Are the servants of the Fu not diligent enough?" The matters at court required some talking, nothing to do with the people of the Fu. Knowing that Mu Fei was meaning to put the blame to Chu Qingju, He Hung said, "These past days, the court has been arguing over some small things. Even us brothers have been examined much by our Fu Huang." Touching upon matters of the court, Jing Fei intelligently didn't continue the line of questioning, only continuing, "You should take care of your body no matter how busy it gets. Now that you are married, you cannot act like you did before." Saying to there, she looked at Chu Qingju who docilely sat at the side. "Your wife is a virtuous one. Just like Mu Fei, she hopes to let Wang Fu be fruitful in children. You don't want all your brothers to have children, and you are still living idly." Chu Qingju's brow moved slightly. Jing Fei was criticizing her for being jealous, not letting He Hung go to another woman's bed. This man's legs are grown on his own body. It was his freedom where he wanted to go. The so-called reign and due must be shared was a joke. If it had to be shared, then why did the Delong dynasty still have the rule that the husband had to reside in the wife's rooms on the 1st and 5th of each month? She didn't have any feelings towards He Hong, but she didn't want to live like a widow. Additionally, she didn't like having something she frequently used be given into the hands of another woman of her own initiative. Did they think she's stupid or a saint? He Hung smiled slightly and didn't reply to Jing Fei's words. He turned his head and looked past Feng Zijin. "Did Mu Fei like the little playthings Qingju sent? A kin? 3. And your Urxi had collected them for many days. I know you were filial." Jing Fei saw he didn't want to follow up on the subject and turned to speak of daily life, asking everything about what He Hung dressed and ate every day. Chu Qingju listened silently at one side. She had to admit, Jing Fei might not be a good popo but was definitely a good mother. She was also very perceptive. Whenever she found a subject He Hung didn't want to talk about, she would move on to another topic, rather than, like other women, continue to try to educate the other until the other had accepted her way of thinking. This was an intelligent woman. Otherwise, she wouldn't be the only imperial consort that could match Xu Fei. The present Hogong IV had an empress, but this empress had no children and her own family wasn't of any significance. Consequently, she didn't have any real power in this Hogong, just an empty scaffold at the top of which she could look at others engaged in conflict. He Hung didn't try to intentionally say good things about Chu Qingju in front of Jing Fei, but he was more attentive in his words to Jing Fei than normal. This caused Jing Fei's smile to not disappear from her face for an instant. When it was time for the noon meal, Jing Fei retained He Hung to eat. Feng Zijin and Jiang Yong you had to stand at one side to serve. Chu Qingju, due to the fact that she had just recovered, received Popo's extra affection and was released from the act of having to serve Popo and sat down beside He Hung. There were more than 10 dishes that were presented. Each dish was finely made, and the skill of the chefs in Zhongjing Palace could be seen. What could also be seen was Jing Fei's position in the Imperial Palace. Go down to serve Wang Fei. Bin Wang doesn't need your service. Waving away Feng Shi who had been coming near, He Hung used his eyes to indicate to Ming He and pointed to the fish stewed in milk in front. This dish Mu Fei likes, serve some over. Even if it was a favorite dish, it wasn't a rare dish but a common one. However, Jing Fei still enjoyed He Hung's attitude and looked twice at Chu Qingju. At least, after her son got closer to her, he was more concerned about her as his mother. Before, she hadn't seen him be this attentive. After a meal, Chu Qingju found that her tastes were very similar to Jing Fei. After rinsing and washing, she silently sat at the side and continued to watch the heartwarming act of the benevolent mother and the filial son. Since you have come into the palace, then go to Kuei-Yuan Palace. 5 to kowtow to the Empress. Jing Fei lazily waved her hand. The Empress' body has been not well these past days. Even if she isn't in need of anything, it is a bit cold there. Finishing, she lifted her eyelids and looked at the 2 Si Fei standing to one side. You two can go outside the palace to wait. Ben Gong is tired. You can all leave. Even though she wanted to use the 2 Si Fei to attack Chu Qingju, that did not extend to giving them the honor of a meeting with the Empress. She looked down at Chu Qingju as not being worthy of being her Erxifu, but she was still of a noble family. Behind her was a strong Tian family. That was enough for her to be a level above the other two. Feng Zijin was unwilling but still assented and bowed. After she walked out of Zhongjing Palace with Jiang Yongyu, her face darkened. Jiang Yongju took a quick look at her and gave a small smile at the end. With a lowered head, she silently walked out of the inner palace. After she went into the carriage and finding Feng Zijin was still slowly walking, she gave a cold smile and said in a low voice, "Fool." The Yahuan beside her acted as though she hadn't heard anything and poured her a cup of tea. Mistress should use some strong tea to chase away sleepiness. Wang Yi and Wang Fei will probably take some time before they could get back. Jiang Yongju took the cup. Seeing Feng Zijin come near, her face slowly returned to her normal expression. Chu Qingju walked behind He Hung. The original didn't have much of an impression of the Empress, only knowing that the Empress family wasn't of remark, and she didn't have much favor with the Emperor. The Emperor had made her Empress because he had seen she was obedient. Because the Empress had no children, the Emperor didn't frequently go to her palace, so the entirety of Kuei-Yuan Palace was usually respectful and careful. It couldn't compare with Xu Fei's place of residence, Zhaoxiang Palace. 6. Coming into Kuei-Yuan Palace, Chu Qingju felt that the inside was overly silent. The palace maids and Taijian were quite as though they were statues. The messenger Taijian quickly came out and guided the two with a smile on his face into the inner hall. Chu Qingju saw the Empress attired in a plain dress and jewelry, her hair in a Chueyun knot. 7. The Empress looked around 40 years old, much older than Jing Fei. On her wrist was a bracelet of Buddha beads. She had a slight smile on her face, but it seemed bland, making it uncertain whether it was a true smile or just out of politeness. Urchin Erxi greets Muhu. 8. He Hung and Chu Qingju performed a proper greeting, not being any less careful because the Empress had no power. You two do not have to be so polite. Sit down. The Empress motioned for the two to sit, and after a maid poured tea, she said, "How come Hunger has come today? I heard that Muhu was ill. Has Muhu taken medicine?" He Heng's tone held concern. Akin was using a meal at Mufei's place today and heard the news. "Muhu, please take more care with the phoenix body. It's just old problems. I've already taken medicine." Hunger has no need to worry. The Empress smiled and used her handkerchief to disguise the cough that came up and turned to look at Chu Qingju. Erxi is more and more beautiful. Muhu is laughing at Erxi. Chu Qingju saw that the Empress' face was pale and there was no spirit in her eyes. She sighed inside. "But after recovery, I have more energy. If Muhu recovered, you could go sunbathe more." Erxi heard the Tai say that this was beneficial to the body. "Muhu remembers your intentions," the Empress nodded. "Last month, San Erxi, who just married, sent over an amount of ginseng and deer antler. Ben Gong cannot use them as the body is too weak, but this sunbathing might work." San Erxi wasn't it Rui Wang, He Yuan's Zhengfei that he married just last month? Chu Qingju couldn't help look twice at the Empress and He Hung. These two's conversation was normal yet formal, but she kept on feeling something wasn't right. The Empress just casually mentioned that San Wangfei had come a few days ago to Kuei Yuan Palace and intentionally said she couldn't use those present. What was she telling He Hung? Scanning the servants inside the palace, there were only 2 Taijian and 2 maids, all silently standing with heads down. They probably were the people the Empress used frequently. Hearing the two start discussing Buddhist scripture, Chu Qingju stared at that string of Buddhist beads on the Empress' wrist. She found that the Empress' wrist was very thin, just a layer of pale skin wrapped around the wrist bone, appearing to be shriveled. The Lungyan scriptures say, "The heart becomes moral. Due to morals, there is concentration. With concentration, insight is found." 9. The Empress coughed. "That is to say, as long as the person can control the heart, then they will not be influenced by the environment." He Hung smiled warmly and took a sip of tea. "Muhu's insights, a Ken can't compare. It's just eating a few more bowls of rice than you have." The Empress moved her gaze past the two of them, looking out the door. "And really, what Ben Gong sees, it's just this little space of the inner palace." Chu Qingju followed her gaze. There wasn't any sunlight outside, just some light that came in from the door, so the room inside wasn't very light. A woman who had nothing, no power, no favor, but she could become the Empress. This kind of woman, a woman that sees the truths in the Hogong, could she be simple? "The day is getting dark, you two should return." The Empress raised a hand to touch the box on her lap. Inside was the knickknacks that the couple had presented, which came from outside the palace. These things, Ben Gong hadn't seen them for many years. Ben Gong likes very much. "Zhang Mama, take out the bolts of yun brocade from Ben Gong stores and let them take back with them. These things have to be worn on the younger people to look good." Chu Qingju, hearing this, hurriedly stood to refuse. "Seeing you dress well, Ben Gong will be happy too. Don't try to refuse. Kuei Yuan Palace might not be as rich as Zhaoxiang Palace, but can still afford to give these things to you younger people." When that was said, Chu Qingju didn't refuse anymore. He Hong saw that the Empress wasn't very energetic and didn't stay longer. Together with Chu Qingju, they bowed and left. Zhang Mama personally sent the two out. Qianchang Xian and Ming He, who had been waiting outside, took the yun brocade. She bowed to the two. "Wang Yi, Wang Fei, walk slowly. This old servant will not send you off further." "Zhang Mama doesn't have to be so courteous." Chu Qingju smiled. Just like how she came, she slowly walked behind He Hung as they walked towards the outside. Zhang Mama called them Wang Yi and Wang Fei without their title in the front. This was the same as the servants in Zhongjin Palace. Were they the same to all the Wang Yi, or just when they reached the doors of the palace? He Hung turned his head back and saw Chu Qingju docilely walking. He suddenly smiled and raised a hand, saying, "Wang Fei, we've reached the carriage." Chu Qingju raised her head and saw the Wang Fu's carriage was just 10 steps away. She looked at the hand in front of her and raised her own hand when she heard a series of steps come from behind her. Chapter 16 Schemes. Chu Qingju turned her head and saw the male and female walking together. The man looked about the same age as He Hung. His appearance was very fine, fine to the point that the word beautiful could be used to describe him. But between his brows, there exuded the arrogance that belonged to those of high position and made it difficult for others to feel close. The female beside him was only about 16 or 17, just a girl. She wasn't very beautiful, but her movements exuded a sense of dignity that told the observer this girl came from a noble family with a good upbringing. The four people stood 3 steps apart. Chu Qingju saw the man opposite give a fake smile and say, "Huang Di greets Huang Xiong, Huang Sa." The girl beside him followed with a bow. Taking back her gaze, Chu Qingju slightly lowered her head. So this was the rumored Rui Wang, He Yuan, the most favored by the emperor. This pair of brothers did seem more polite than affectionate. "Sandy doesn't have to be so courteous." He Hung smiled and returned a bow, looking at the numerous attendants and maids behind him. "Between us brothers, there isn't a need to be so polite. Huang Xiong is joking. Courtesy cannot be thrown away." He Yuan placed his hands behind his back and looked coolly at the docile Chu Qingju standing at one side. "Huang Xiong and Huang Sa are very much in love." The Chu family was a joke, but this good Huang Xiong of his, to get the support of the Tian family, had very good tolerance. "Sandy is teasing." He Hung didn't like He Yuan's attitude, but he didn't show it on his face. "The day grows dark. Didi can walk together with Wei Xiong 3. Chu Qingju silently stood to one side, but hearing He Yuan's words, she furrowed her brows. As a younger brother who wasn't emotionally attached to his older brother, yet carelessly discussed the relationship between his brother and his sister-in-law, so this He Yuan was very impudent. "Huang Xiong first." He Yuan's lips forced themselves into a smile. "Didi will follow after. Then Wei Sheng will go first." He Hung didn't waste words with him, taking Chu Qingju and walking away. At the carriage, he helped Chu Qingju climb on first before following after. "Che, Bin Wang's Huang Xiong is such a kind lover." He Yuan looked at the faraway carriage, his face showing a disdainful smile. A few days earlier, he had been angry on behalf of his wife and struck out at Changde Gongfu. Now, right in front of the palace doors, he was full of meticulous concern for his Wang Fei. Who was he acting for? The silent Rui Wang Fei, Qin Bailu, standing to one side, raised her head upon hearing the words. She looked with a complicated gaze at the faraway carried and said in a low voice, "Maybe it's true. My good Wang Fei, are you not yet clear about the imperial family?" He Yuan scoffed as he walked forwards. "Let's go. Don't look anymore." Qin Bailu curved her lips as she followed. Her eyes looked at He Yuan as he climbed onto a carriage at the front, as she held a Yahuan's hand go get on a carriage behind. Inside the slightly swaying carriage, Chu Qingju reclined back on the cushion. "His Highness Rui Wang, his actions are really honest and uninhibited." He Hung heard that description, his eyebrows slightly moving. If these words were used to describe famous people and scholars, it was a compliment. Used to describe an imperial son, it wasn't a very kind description. This Wang Fei of his, she was a wondrous person. This description Wang Fei used is very unique. This man definitely did not like Rui Wan very much. She, as his Wang Fei, naturally will be in the same trench as him during battle. Hearing He Hung say this, Chu Qingju smiled as she straightened. "Is Wang Yi complimenting Xie?" He Hung smiled, looking at her for a beat, before saying, "Naturally." The smile on Chu Qingju's face became brighter. If He Hung could say this to her, this meant that he had some basic trust in her. As to how deep that trust went, that wasn't something she needed to be concerned about. He Hung also didn't keep talking about Rui Wang and leaned back against the soft cushions behind. When Chu Qingju closed her eyes, she thought, He Hung was even more complicated than she had thought. This type of man was like the epitome of a person of the imperial family. Anything other members of the family had, he also had. The journey into the palace ended like that. The following month, she spent it peacefully passing time in the Wang Fu. But the weather was getting colder, and the Fu had to change to winter clothes and use charcoal. That meant that Chu Qingju had to meet all the stewards multiple times. As the Wang Fei, she didn't have to do everything herself. For many things, she only needed to make the decision, and there would be enough servants to do the work for her. It was just like the CEOs of big companies in her previous life that didn't need to personally order what duties a janitor had to do. If she had to manage everything herself, she didn't need to keep being this Wang Fei, and this food didn't need to support these people. In the silent hall, Chu Qingju leisurely flipped through a ledger. On the ground, there knelt a few of the major stewards of the Wang Fu. These major stewards had come from the palace and had gone through tribulations, but at this time, each had an expression of fear and their faces were full of sweat even in this cold winter as they knelt on the ground. Eggs are 1 tael of silver for 5. Smiling as she closed the ledge, she looked at the steward responsible for buying vegetables and other groceries. Chu Qingju gently threw the ledger in front of him. I heard that a normal family in DeLong Dynasty, they live on about 25 taels of silver a year. I hadn't known that our DeLong Dynasty's people were in such difficult conditions that their living expenses for a year isn't enough for us to eat 100 eggs. Just like this, you, a major steward, still say that there isn't enough money to go around. Come on, say how there isn't enough. This steward was frightened to the point of shuddering. He had assumed that Wang Fei and the Yahuan beside her were used to luxurious living and would know how much profit there was in here. And the stewards that did the purchasing and other Wang fuss were the same as him, so he had been confident that there weren't any slip-ups. Who knew that Wang Fei would just flip a few pages of the ledger before erupting with anger. Replying to Wang Fei, you may not know, but 25 taels is the yearly expenses of rural areas. In this Jing city of ours, everything costs multiple what they do in other places. Nukai is helpless. The steward had no other way except refusing to admit anything. Chu Qingju didn't look at him and continued to flip open another ledge. A bolt of cotton is 5 taels, normal satin is 20 taels a bolt. She threw the ledge onto the person responsible, not listening to the excuses, and continued to flip. In just an hour, all the ledgers had been thrown to the floor. Chu Qingju raised a teacup and took a mouthful. Wang Yang, get the people you found to copy the prices at the market to come in. Tell those people, if they copied it well, they will be the new stewards. The people heard the words, and their expressions changed. They had assumed that Wang Fei would only berate them, not that she was going to discharge all of them. Instantly, some started yelling that they were innocent. One of them that had been responsible for purchasing cloth, relying on the fact that he had been with Wang Yi when he came out of the palace, actually said, Wang Fei, Nukai has served Wang Yi for many years and wouldn't do anything to harm the Wang Fu. What you are doing, it is saying that Wang Yi was mistaken in his choices. Chu Qingju heard this and suddenly smiled, viciously throwing the teacup in her hand in front of this person. What things are you, that you say you are worthy of being picked by Wang Yi? The only servants in this Fu that deserve these words are Qian Chang Xian, Ming He, and a few that serve him directly. Wang Yi hasn't punished you yet. You already started overreaching. If these words spread, wouldn't they say that I, Wang Fei, isn't as valuable as you servants? Qian Chang Xian and Ming He coincidentally heard those words as they just walked to the doorway. The two exchanged looks, stopped walking, and guarded the doorway, looking as though they were protecting Wang Fei. Huang Yang had coming in with a few Taijian. He bowed in greeting to the two before entering the rooms. Qian Chang Xian and Ming He found that these people were some of those that were capable in this Fu. If Wang Fei chose these people to take over from the originals, that would be the best solution. The two suddenly felt cold. It had appeared that Wang Fei didn't care to manage this Hoyuan, so they hadn't thought that she understood the servants of this Wang Fu this well. Thinking of this, the two found that they had been underestimating Wang Fei in the past. They had assumed that she had some skill with Wang Yi but didn't think on these matters. She was also unremarkable when not moving, but shocking when she moved. This year, the harvest of rice is 251 for per dan 5. Eggs are 2 when each. Normal satin is 5 taels per bolt. As the people that came in recited the prices of good, the kneeling stewards' faces grew pale, and the only reason they didn't collapse was that they were holding their breath. Look at how this has exhausted these stewards. Chu Qingju held a newly changed teacup and said calmly, Somebody come. Bestow these stewards each a big bowl of iced pickled plum soup. The season was already winter. Each bowl of pickled plum soup had more ice than water. After the stewards drank it down, their teeth started to chatter. The rebellious steward of before looked at Chu Qingju and said stutteringly, Wang Fei has such schemes. Wang Yi should really look at your might. This was telling her, if she was harsh, she would be disliked by Wang Yi. Chu Qingju didn't get angry but smiled instead. She blew on the tea in the cup and slowly announced, "This person disrespected Bin Wang Fei. Beat 20 times, and then send the person to the Department of Household Affairs. Just say that he hasn't learned etiquette well enough, that Duan Wang Fei can't retain such a servant." Since he said her schemes were good, how could she disappoint him? When she finished, there were people who dragged this steward down. The remaining few instantly became respectful, only begging Wang Fei to not send them back to the Department of Household Affairs. Servants that had been sent out from Household Affairs that were sent back, even if they didn't die in strange circumstances, their fates would be worse than death. They would rather get beaten than go back to that place. Seeing the stewards quiet in fear, Chu Qingju set down the teacup. "Do you know your mistake?" The stewards heard the tone of Wang Fei's voice, and it seemed that this matter could still be negotiated, so they instantly started to kowtow and admit their wrongs. Chu Qingju said out of the corner of her mouth, "Since you are sincere and you know your wrongs, I have a soft heart, so you are only sentenced to 10 strokes and half a year's salary, the position just vice steward, and these people are now the main stewards. Any opinions?" She pointed at the people who had copied the prices. The stewards didn't think that they wouldn't be sent back to Household Affairs and could keep a position of vice steward. All were brimming with gratitude and said that Wang Fei was benevolent and would work hard for the Wang Fu etc. in the future. You should all do good work. Who really did work, who slacked off, I will know. If people will do this again in the future, I won't take your life. Just compliantly go back to Household Affairs. Chu Qingju sighed and held Mu Jin's hand as she stood. Go back to work if you have work, punishment if you have punishment, you can all leave. Standing at the doorway, Qian Changxian and Ming He looked at the people that came out. Each looked as though they were lucky. They sighed again. Wang Fei had good schemes. Chapter 17. A Woman's Heart. A needle at the bottom of the ocean. The new winter clothes were distributed out in the Fu. The servants found that this year's clothes, while made of the same cloth as in the past, were much thicker. Each person also got an extra robe. Everybody was cheerful, and thought that this Fu was certainly different now that a mistress arrived. Even their living conditions, as servants, increased. Xiao Ganzi's hand held the little things that the people underneath him gave, a smile on his face as he said to the little Taijian beside him, "Look at the happy faces of everybody, it's like New Year's." He knew the truth inside. This Wang Fu looked golden and wealthy, but the servants at the very bottom only just managed to fill their hunger. If they were compared to the servants that were of significance to their Zhuzi, it was the difference between the sky and the ground. No wonder these people were so happy when they received a little bit of goodness. It's just that Wang Fei is benevolent and that Gij and the two main stewards are good managers. The little Taijian carefully fawned from beside him. The last few days, the stewards were punished by Wang Fei, but they didn't get angry and became obedient. Now, this entire Fu, who would make things difficult on purpose for those below them? They're nothing. If Wang Fei wants to punish them, they should accept it. Even if she wanted their lives, they could only rage that their luck isn't good. Xiao Ganzi said to hear and looked at the Taijian in front of him. You're one of my subordinates. Remember that the decision-maker of this Hoyuan is Wang Fei. If you do stupid things, they don't blame Gij for not protecting you. Don't worry, Gij, don't worry. The little Taijian received Xiao Ganzi's warning and said in gratitude, I will listen to Gij's words and definitely will not do stupid things. Xiao Ganzi nodded in satisfaction. Even if he wasn't relied on as much as Qin Changxian and Ming He was still one of those relied on by Wang Yi. Presently, Wang Yi was clearly desiring to support Wang Fei. Wang Fei was like a storm. Those actions had been so fast, he hadn't managed to recover yet. What warning, what talk before battle, all that wasn't used. It was first a storm of beating, to frighten people, and then things became much easier. Those people had thought that Wang Fei would be constrained by Wang Ye's way of doing things. Even he had thought so. So when the event had occurred, he had found an excuse to get out of the Fu to avoid the storm. Who knew that Wang Fei directly punished the people, not even notifying Wang Yi. After Wang Yi resided another night at Zhangyuan, he had energetically went to court the second morning. He just knew that this incident had allowed Qian Changxian and Ming He get a big freebie. Not as skilled as others, No wonder those two were most influential with Wang Yi. Xiao Ganzi sighed. He had a long way to go to be as clever. Even if he couldn't compete against the pair of Qin and Ming, at the very least, he had to make sure to not let others take over his position. Inside the gardens of the Wang Fu, Huang Yin hurriedly walked. A Yahuan with a sweet face came over and kept on yelling, "Huang Yang Gij," blocking him on the path. Huang Yang was irritated inside but asked in a normal voice, "This Jejia, is there something?" The little Yahuan didn't dare accept his label of Jejia. In the past, it wouldn't have mattered, but now, who in this Fu didn't know that he was the Taijian that Wang Fei relied on the most? She smiled, refusing the title, and said, "Huang Yang Gij, my mistress has been sick these past days. The doctor was called but didn't help. Please help my mistress by saying a few good words in front of Wang Fei, and get Wang Fei to send an invitation to the Imperial Hospital." Finishing, she tried to push a pouch into Huang Yan's hand. Huang Yang saw her face was unfamiliar and didn't take that pouch. He placed his hands behind his back. His tone became more serious. "Who is your mistress?" The little Yahuan saw Huang Yang wasn't accepting it. Feeling frantic and helpless, she could only say, "Good Gij, I serve Yun Gunyang. Could you help my mistress ask Wang Fei? I'll thank you here first." Finishing, she gave Huang Yang a deep bow. "Whose Yahuan is this?" The little Yahuan heard the voice and turned to look. She saw Wang Yi, with Qin Chang Xian and Ming Yi, walk over. The one that spoke was Ming He. She instantly cheered up and knelt with a bang. "Newbie is Yuer, a servant of Yun Gunyang." Newbie greets Wang Yi. He hung slowly neared, slightly lowering his head to look at Yuer kneeling by his feet. He then asked Huang Yang, "What's going on?" Huang Yang bent his body and said, "Wang Yi, this Yuer Gunyang said Yun Gunyang is ill. To let Nukai tell Wang Fei to let Wang Fei send a notice to the Imperial Hospital and invite a Tai Yi to take a look at Yun Gunyang." He hung, frowned, and, with no hesitation, walked away. Qin Chang Xian quickly followed behind. Ming He, who had remained behind, looked arrogantly at Yuer and said in a tone of fake wonderment, "Yun Gunyang must be confused due to her illness. Our Fu, except for Wang Yi and Wang Fei, there is only the Si Fei and proper Cheshire that can request for a Tai. Is her Juzi one of the above that she could invite a Tai?" When she had been sent into the Wang Fu, wasn't it her, with a face full of virtue, that said she would rather be a poor person than a chia of a wealthy person? A brothel girl that had been given as a present who really thought she was a noble lady. With her birth, being made a Tongfang would be giving the official that gave her a great honor. She didn't care to be a Cheshire in this Wang Fu. What fantasy did she have? Now she was ill, and the doctors outside the Fu wasn't worthy of serving her. She wanted a Tai? She wasn't worthy. Ming He scoffed and walked away. Huang Yang looked at the shocked Yuer, his expression unchanging, and said, "Go back and tell your mistress, if this doctor isn't useful, then change the doctor. If you need something, then tell Mu Jing Gunyang. I have duties to do. I'm leaving first." After Huang Yang was more than 10 steps away, Yuer finally managed to react. She looked in shock at the direction that Wang Yi had left and seemed to understand in part why the people around her had looked at her in sympathy when she had been ordered to serve in Chuiyu Yuan. So it was really the case that Wang Yi didn't care at all about Mistress, and it wasn't like Mistress said, that Wang Yi liked Mistress in his heart. That was just Mistress fantasy? If he really liked Mistress, why would Wang Yi not even react? Yuer slowly stood and slowly walked back. Ming He Gonggong had said the facts so clearly that even if Mistress was unsatisfied, she had tried her best. When Huang Yuan reached Zhengyuan, he told Chu Qingju what had occurred, reciting the entire incident from beginning to end. Yun Gunyang? Towards Yun Qing, Chu Qingju only remembered the white clothing and that virtuous attitude. It honored Wang Yi falls in love with the Huakue. Due to the chasteness of the Huakue, his love deepens. At the end, he overcomes all forces and lived happily ever after with the Huakue. That kind of story was a fairy tale. Did that stupid woman really believe that He Hong was a character from a story? Send somebody to deliver some medicine and find a useful doctor. Chu Qingju smiled as she said calmly, "Just a 16-year-old girl. She has a long life ahead. We shouldn't let her lose her life. Wang Fei is too kind. You are grown up now. Why are you still so moved by others?" Lu put a hot water bottle wrapped in cloth into Chu Qingju's hands. At the beginning, her face and that mouth, they were so proud. Chu Qingju smiled and held the bottle with both hands. You dumb girl. Lu wasn't as clever as Mu Jin, but people with this kind personality had their own uses as times. What was rare was her loyalty. She was used to this kind of nagging. This entire Fu is watching. At one side, Mu Jin stood as she looked helplessly at Lu. This person isn't causing pain to Wang Fei. If she stood by and watched her die, what would it look like in the eyes of others? Chu Qingju didn't care for the two's discussion and waved at Huang Yang, saying, This thing, you personally order somebody to do. Just say I have an affection for Yunqing Gunyang's appearance, and let others take good care of her. She didn't like Yunqing personally, but not to the point of watching her die of illness. She didn't have such a twisted state of mind. Huang Yang took his orders and retreated, thinking coldly that Yunqing Gunyang, though she was so virtuous, but right now, it was only due to Wang Fei's pity that she could keep her life. If she had the skill, she could find somebody else. That was true virtue. Inside Chui Yuan, Yunqing laid on bed with a yellow face. Hearing Year, with a face full of happiness, say that Wang Fei was benevolent and on, the hate in her eyes grew deeper. Why was it that she could only live by the sympathy of other women who were much higher in position? Why was it that she had both skill and looks, but she couldn't beat the plain Jiang Yongyu and others? Drinking the bitter medicine, a strong desire to live infected her eyes. She couldn't die. She definitely couldn't die. She wanted to stand at the high position and see who dared to sympathize with her, and who dared look down at her. Chu Qingju heard that the Yunqing and Chui Yang cooperated greatly with the doctor and placed down the pen in her hand with interest. Looking at the butterfly in flight on the paper, she examined for a while before saying, Heart higher than the sky, life thinner than paper. Mu Jin placed a branching tree peony brazier onto the desk and said with a smile, Wang Fei had expected it. This type of person, they can't hear words of pity, carelessly throwing the paper to one side. Chu Qingju started to draw a vibrant peony. Feng Zijin is too idle these days. Otherwise, how could she send the news of the Fu over to Jing Fei? Why is Wang Fei sure it's her? Mu Jin hesitated before saying, It looks as though Jing Fei looks down at the two of them. The type of person that Jing Fei, she wants to suppress me who doesn't have her favor, but doesn't want to see Fei to really win over me. So she would try to understand me from a certain Si Fei, but she wouldn't want that Si Fei to break etiquette. That was why that day in Zhongjing Palace, she would easily release me from service and let the two Si Fei stand from beginning to end. Chu Qingju wielded the pen, quickly sketching a peach blossom. Jiang Yongyu is a smart person, so she surely wouldn't do something that will offend me. Then the most suspicious is Feng Zijin. In this era, how Popo treated Erxi was the strangest mindset in this entire world. A lot of the time, they liked to bully their own Erxifu, but they couldn't see others embarrass their Erxifu. Otherwise, why would they say a woman's heart, a needle at the ocean bottom? Mu Jin heard the words and thought carefully, finding that it was somewhat rational. But thinking about how Jing Fei would sometimes make things purposefully difficult, Mu Jin still felt that Jing Fei, as a popo, was hard to serve. A simple daffodil appeared on the page. Chu Qingju didn't have the interest in drawing anymore and let Jin Zhan, who had been at the side, put it away. She smiled at Mu Jin, who seemed to be in deep thought. You don't have to be too worried. Jing Fei might be hard to deal with, but she isn't impossible. To deal with those that thought too much, the most effective weapon was naivety. She wasn't naturally naive, but she could pretend to be. The women in the palace preferred to use their mouths as blades to stab people. Pretending not to understand would enrage her. Since Jing Fei wouldn't really move against her right now, what was she afraid of? Chapter 18. Bathing together in the study, He Hong closed the missive in his hands. Looking at the completely darkened sky, he said, Come, light the way to Zhengyuan. Ming He, who had been waiting at the door, motioned for a little Taijian to hold a sectioned-off lantern and personally held a tasseled palace lamp. He waited quietly at the side for Wang Yi to start on his way. The study and Zhengyuan were separated by a garden. He Hong walked to the border of the garden and saw a shadow hidden beside the fake mountain. The person couldn't be identified from the pale shadow, but the sound of a female voice reciting a poem spread. When the geese are returning, the full moon shines down on the western tower. The flowers fall, the waters flow. Who's there? He hung looked expressionlessly at that shadow. The flickering lamplight made as though his eyes had an additional light. Wang Yi. The voice suddenly stopped, visibly frightened. A woman wearing a pale robe tied at the waist with red eyes kneeled in front of He Hung. A white jade hairpin was the only ornament in her hair. The thin figure kneeling on the ground seemed as pitiful as one could ever be. Ming He saw the lack of expression on Wang Yi and spoke. Yunqing Gunyang, what are you doing here? It's cold these winter nights, you've just recovered. You should wear more clothing. He Heng's lips curled. He looked at the insubstantial article of clothing on Yunqing and started to walk around Yunqing. Originally, he had felt that she was a little bit interesting, but looking at her pitiful act, he suddenly felt nothing at all. This wasn't as enticing as when she had acted virtuous and noble. When a virtuous woman suddenly turned to ingratiation, it didn't seem as interesting. Yunqing watched as Wang Yi walked away. She gritted her teeth and said, Wang Yi. He Hung turned his head to look at the woman still kneeling on the ground. He suddenly spoke. Do you still remember when Bin Wang wanted to make you my Tong Fong, what you said? Nu said, to receive the heart and soul of one person, to not separate until the heads turn white. Yunqing raised her head to look at He Hung, her eyes full of adoration. Then what are you doing now? He Hung scanned Yunqing in an interested manner from head to toe before his gaze, at the end, fell upon that pale white chest. Nu is truly in love with Wang Yi. The tears in Yunqing's eyes glimmered. If Nu had the foresight to know what would happen today, Nu wouldn't have stayed in this Wang Fu in the very beginning. Che. He Hung raised his eyebrows and spoke to Ming He. Remember tomorrow to remind Bin Wang to raise this woman to a Tong Fong. Send somebody to deliver her back. It's very late, don't alarm any others. Finishing, he turned and walked towards the Zhengyuan, not looking even once more upon Yunqing who was still kneeling. Ming He smiled and glanced at Yunqing. Nu Kai will remember. He turned to follow. After everyone had left, Yunqing finally stood. She wiped away the tears at the corners of her eyes, staring with wide eyes in the direction that Wang Yi had left in. Her gaze lit up with unprecedented brightness. He Hung stepped into the Zhengyuan and dismissed the announcement of the servants. He strode directly into the room that Chu Qingju lived in. At the doorway, he saw Chu Qingju gazing at a jade gourd pendant under the light. Her gaze held a peace that he had never seen before, as though time had stopped within her eyes. He knew that this jade gourd had been left behind by Wang Fei's birth mother, Tianshi. These past days, Wang Fei had kept it constantly on her neck. Seeing her posture, he assumed that she was reminiscing about her birth mother, so he said, Wang Fei, why haven't you gone to sleep yet? Wang Ye's here. Chu Qingju placed the jade gourd back around her neck. She stood and walked in front of He Hung. She smiled as she saw the familiar palace maids and Tai Jian outside the doorway and said, It's so deep into the night. I thought Wang Yi wouldn't have come. The long night passes by slowly. Without Wang Fei at the side, Bin Wang has no desire for sleep. He Hung and closed the person in front into his arms. He lowered his head to kiss Chu Qingju's forehead. Come, a bath and a change of clothes. Hot steam rose from the enormous bathtub. Flower petals floated on the surface as Chu Qingju was taken along by He Hung into the water. The two faced each other nakedly and experienced together in the tub the intimacy of skin. He Heng's hand swept across Chu Qingju's pale chest, his index finger curling around the delicate jade gourd. He gave a deep laugh. The way Qingju looks, nobody could resist. He bent over to suck on those moist lips. He didn't like kissing women, but to be this intimate with Wang Fei, he felt a few stirrings of emotion. Taking advantage of He Heng's bent legs as a seat, Chu Qingju lifted her hand to wrap around He Hung, pressing her soft chest into He Heng's embrace. There was an unspeakable charm about her full head of hair spread out in the water, contrasting against the vibrant flower petals. A warm palm glided across a smooth back, slowly moving downwards and lighting a ferocious fire. A round of delights of the flesh later, both felt very contented. He Hung off-handedly grabbed a robe, bending down to carry Chu Qingju from the slightly cold water. He placed her on the bed and took a towel to personally dry her hair for her. When men were satisfied, they always were especially caring. That quality could be seen very clearly on He Hung. Chu Qingju slid on an inner robe and allowed He Hung to continue his attentive behavior. She yawned. Why did Wang Yi come so late this night? Had to take care of something, so it was a bit late. He Hung saw that the hair was more or less dry and switched for a new towel to dry his own hair. The two wrapped around each other as they sat inside the blankets. In the time as they waited for hair to dry, they started to chit-chat about other things. I heard that you had sorted out that group of disobedient stewards? He Hung inquired suddenly. That group is truly disgraceful. You were too benevolent to them. This type of people, they should be beaten to death. Lives aren't that worthless, Chu Qingju laughed. I saw that they are very sincere in their present duties. They have learned their lesson. If they can fulfill their duties, it would be a great boon for this Wang Fu. Those disobedient servants, you don't have to be soft-hearted. He Hung knew everything about how Chu Qingju was handling the affairs of the Ho Yuan. He didn't find anything unsound. To take control of the Ho Yuan and at the same time make others feel appreciated while inspiring respect, that took skill. The Wang Fei that He Hung wanted was this kind. If a death occurred, it wouldn't be good for our Duan Wang Fu. Chu Qingju understood He Hung's intentions and said, "This is enough." Upon hearing this, He Hung didn't continue on the matter and turned to the jade gourd on Chu Qingju's neck. This jade gourd is very exquisite. Chu Qingju rubbed the jade gourd when it was mentioned. Her smile became fainter. This was left behind by Chia's mother and was always in the possession of stepmother. At the beginning, all possible ways were tried, but this couldn't be wrested from her hands. Now that Chia is Duan Wang Fei, she quickly presents it. These words praised He Hung and also took a few stabs at Liang Shi. Chu Qingju felt no pressure doing it. This Liang Shi is a cruel person. He Hung's face darkened as he said, "Now, with me to protect you, she wouldn't dare to be as bold. It was good fortune that your Jujio protected you in the past. Otherwise, where would I find such a virtuous wife?" To call the Tian family by Jujio, but to call the Changde Duke by Duke. Even if he was a member of the imperial family and he could use whatever titles he liked, this double standard was a bit too obvious. My Jujio and Jiumu always protected Chia. Otherwise, how could Chia have the 120 trunks for my dowry when I married into the Wang Fu? And those properties and stores. All of those were left for me by my mother or added by my aunt on the day of. Chu Qingju laughed lightly. Chia is both unfortunate but fortunate. At least Chia has a protective Jujio. Jujio is kind. He Hung smiled as he hugged the other. Now that you are the mistress of the Wang Fu, if you have free time, you could invite your Jimu over. I also want to meet your two Biaoti one. If Wang Yi doesn't disdain Jujio's family, Chia will definitely let the Biaoti pay their respects to you if there is a chance. Chu Qingju raised her head to look at Duan Wang. A smile bloomed on her face as though she was very happy that He Hung was close to her Jujio. We're brothers of the same family, don't discuss paying respects. He Hung was very satisfied with Xiangqing Ho Fu. The family discipline was tight and proper and their actions were upright. This type of family didn't dishonor the reputation of the noble families. So to call the Marquis of Xiangqing by Jujio, he was very willing to do so. Chu Qingju's smile didn't change upon hearing the words. They wouldn't dare call themselves brothers of Wang Yi. Wang Yi might not know. Those two Biaoti of Chia's are very pedantic from studying all day. The only things they talk about all day are the heaven, earth, emperor, family, and teacher. For them to disregard your position, it would be harder than for them to stop studying. This is a good family. He Hung caught the closeness that Chu Qingju felt towards the Tian family. He patted her back and said, "In future interactions with the Tian family, don't doubt yourself. There are relatives. There's no need to be overly cautious." Chu Qingju naturally agreed. As to what she would do, that was her concern. The conduct of the Tian family was naturally one loyal to the emperor. She didn't dare be interested in what He Hung thought, but she didn't want the Tian family to get swept into this type of matter. She, Chu Qingju, was not a kind person, but she knew an eye for an eye, and to repay others for their kindness. She mysteriously possessed this body, so she had to repay the favor. When she woke on the morning of the second day, Chu Qingju sent off He Hong to the royal court before taking a beauty nap. She just rose to wash and eat breakfast but heard a curious matter before she finished her meal. You are saying that Wang Yi is taking Yun Qinggunyang as a Tong Fong? She wiped her hands. Looking at Xiao Ganzi, she said with a joyless smile, that being the case, bestow upon Yun Qing a pair of jade bracelets as my congratulations to her. Wang Fei is very kind. Just a Tong Fong, it isn't worth your gift, Xiao Ganzi replied with a smile. It was just last night that Yun Qing nagged Wang Yi in the gardens. Wang Yi was too impatient to deal with her, so he said to make her a Tong Fong. It was just a sentence. Nothing else has been bestowed down. Nagged Wang Yi? Chu Qingju smiled thinly. No wonder he was late last night. He had stopped to admire a beautiful woman. Xiao Ganzi saw that Wang Fei had a calm smile and thought to himself that Wang Fei didn't seem to care for the matter. His heart went back into his chest and he continued, yes, those of inferior birth, they only know those cheap tricks. Nu Kai is afraid of dirtying Wang Fei's ears if he said them out loud. It must have been hard for Xiao Ganzi Gonggong to be so clear of the matter. Chu Qingju smiled. The Wang Fu is getting busier these days. You can help me look at the stewards in charge of purchasing, see if they have been remiss in any areas. Nu Kai will keep a close look. Xiao Ganzi felt a burst of joy. The purchasing of good was a rich duty. With what Wang Fei had said, those stewards responsible for daily purchases, didn't they had to carefully worship him on a pedestal? As expected, the best way was to ingratiate himself with Wang Fei. He wouldn't try to compete with Ming He and the others. But to be favored with Wang Fei, wasn't that also a sign of his abilities? Chapter 19 Choices. He Hong wasn't the most favored by the Emperor of the Four Wangs, but there were still many invitations that were sent on a daily basis to Duan Wang Fu. Today there would be somebody presenting tea, tomorrow somebody would offer the new fruits from their farm, then the day after somebody would send over a famous piece of art. All invitations for the females of the household would be given over to Chu Qingju. Some people she would meet. Some people she would put aside the invitation and could be satisfied by a meeting with those under her. It was truly, the gatekeeper of the Prime Minister's residence was a fourth-rank official. Not just her as a Wang Fei. There were many who wanted to ingratiate themselves with the maternal families of the Cheshire. So when she saw the card that the family of Han Qing he sent in, Chu Qingju hesitated before saying, let somebody meet this person, then tell him the rule of the Fu is the Cheshire can receive their family during the festivals. 1. Or if pregnant, but not otherwise. This wasn't just that this was a Wang Fu. Even in normal families, there wasn't the tradition of a Cheshire's family being invited if it wasn't festival time. This family is very rude. Wang Fei, even your relatives know to not ask for an invite when there are no important matters. But this Inyang has to be special. In Lu looked disdainfully at the unremarkable card. Newbie still remembers that attitude that Han Inyang had in the beginning, just because she was the first ever to serve Wang Yi. All right, Chu Qingju looked calmly at Yin Lu. Get somebody to send the gifts this person presented to Han Shirchia. Tell Han Shir, it isn't that I am not accommodating, but the rules of this house has to be respected. Presently, several of the Wang Yi were all thirsting for that position. It would be best for the Wang Fu to not interact with strangers. If something went wrong, Duan Wang might just strangle her to death. Her arrogance could lead to her death, but that was better than being strangled by somebody else. And Shi Yuan, Han Qing, he looked at the things on the table. It was just a few playthings that wasn't worth much. She didn't know how hard those watching from the doorway were laughing on the inside. She forced out a hint of the smile and said to Shu Kuei in front of her, my thanks to Shu Kuei Gunyang, and please give my thanks to Wang Fei. Inyang doesn't have to be so polite. Before Newbie came over, Wang Fei had said that it was a woman's good fortune if her relatives thought of her. It is just that the Wang Fu has rules and cannot allow you to meet them, so hopefully you can understand. Shu Kuei had originally been one of the Wang Fu servants. She was now a first-rank Yahuan serving Wang Fei, and was well respected by other servants in the Fu. So upon seeing the respectful attitude of Han Shir, her expression was normal, but her actions still carried the appropriate level of subservience for a servant as she kept her head lowered in respect of Han Shir. Wang Fei is too kind. It is truly Nu's family who is nagging, and Wang Fei was benevolent to keep their things. Wang Fei's virtues, Nu will remember in her heart. Han Qing was quieter now. She understood very well. Originally, these things wouldn't have been brought in front of her. Wang Fei was able to let her keep these things. Regardless of if Wang Fei was true or false in her intentions, she had to admit she felt gratitude towards Wang Fei. Her maternal family was of low status and could never sin over anything good. These things were playthings she had liked before she had entered the palace. But when she had followed Wang Yi into the Wang Fu, she had never received anything from home. Looking at it now, her family most likely sent something every year, but the servants never delivered it inside. Remembering that before Wang Fei had married in, the most favored had been Feng Zijin. Han Qing laughed icily inside. She hated that her maternal family wasn't of significance and was ashamed to mention them, but looking at the gifts, she felt very complicated. Something sour and bitter manifested in her heart. The 2nd of the 12th month, it was an auspicious day. Chu Qingju sat on the center seat. Sitting under her was Feng, Jiang, Luo, and Han. At the moment, all four didn't have their eyes on Chu Qingju, but were inspecting Yun Qing, who was standing in the middle of the room in a pale pink dress. Leaning on the armchair, Chu Qingju used a hand to hold her head up. She lazily sipped at a cup of tea and looked at the 5 women underneath her. She said slowly, "Since Wang Yi wants to raise you to become a Tong Fong, we have no objections. Tong Fong cannot compare to a yin yang. We can't hold a banquet. I couldn't bear to let you enter Wang Ye's house without even a sound, so you should perform a greeting to Bin Wang Fei and these seated here. This is to let those under you know that you are not a guest of this house anymore, but one of Wang Ye's women." That's so true. At the beginning, I had thought that Wang Yi would elevate you, but who knew that you weren't willing and became a guest of this house? But good things come to those who wait. You have finally entered this fu. Feng Zijin smiled as she looked at Yun Qing. Look at this face. It's so tender a touch will squeeze out water. No wonder Wang Yi likes it. Everybody in the Wang Fu knew what had happened. Feng Zijin's voice was full of scorn and clearly wanted to embarrass Yun Qing. Yun Qing's face suddenly paled. She bit her lip and replied, "Feng Si Fei is joking. Yun Qing is of low birth. It is just that Wang Yi has taken pity. I cannot compare to how much Wang Yi favors Wang Fei and those here." It seems Yun Qing Gunyang still doesn't understand the etiquette of this Wang Fu. Feng Zijin laughed coldly. This Tong Fong, in front of the Zhuzi, have to call themselves newbie. Even how their limbs are placed, how they stand, there are rules. If you don't understand, we can have some of the mamas of the Fu teach you. Newbie will remember. Yun Qing hesitated before bending her legs, her head hanging even lower. Chu Qingju sat on her elevated seat and saw how pale her lips turned and the tightly gripped hands hidden under the sleeves. This was like the teacher at the podium and the student of the past life. The student believed that their little movements were concealed but didn't know that the teacher could see everything clearly. Feng Si Fei, seeing Yun Qing's state, snorted in disinterest and didn't speak further. Zhang Yongsu and the others were never overly talkative in front of Chu Qingju, and at this time wouldn't speak at all, so they bent their heads and drank tea. All right, then start the salutation. Chu Qingju slightly straightened her body and smiled down at Yun Qing standing at the bottom. A Tong Fong giving the full greeting of 3 bows and 9 kowtows to the wife. That was the generosity of the wife and a glorious honor for the Tong Fong. But this type of event occurring on Yun Qing, it was a humiliation, not an honor. When Cheshire performed their salutations, they just had to offer tea. She was a Tong Fong and she had to bow 3 times and kowtow 9 times. What honor was that? But even so, she had to bear the humiliation and knelt down. She slowly bowed. Knock, knock, and knock. She stood and did the greeting 3 times before opening in a trembling voice. Newbie greets Wang Fei. In. Chu Qingju nodded and handed a gold hairpin to her from a tray that Jin Zhan held. In the future, serve Wang Yi well. Yun Qing knelt and took the gold hairpin with 2 hands. She kowtowed to Chu Qingju again before walking to Pin Zijin and performed a 1 bow and 3 kowtow greeting. Newbie greets Feng Si Fei. I'm not as wealthy as Wang Fei, and I heard before that you disdain gold for being too vulgar and silver too blinding. You are multi-talented. You can flip though this book, Fan Huaji, for your amusement. Feng Jizin held the book to Yunqing and smiled. I think you would like this book. Fan Huaji was a story that spoke of a rich young man who fell for the schemes of a huakue and almost lost his true love in the form of a noble young lady. In the end, the rich young man and the noble young lady married, but the huakue, due to her many despicable actions, was detained in jail and sentenced. Chu Qingju looked at that book that was wrinkled as Yunqing held it and silently drank tea. It was only when Yunqing finished greeting the other two Shirchia before she opened. Now the Fu has 3 Tong Fong. Banxia was from my side. Bai Ji and Yunqing were sent in from outside the Fu. I don't have many rules and I don't need you to come to Zhenyuan to serve me. In the future, if Wang Yi doesn't call for you to serve, you should stay in your rooms to rest and not worry about other matters. Hearing this, the other 4 sitting felt a spurt of joy. Everybody in this Fu knew that Wang Yi didn't like Yahuan to serve him on a daily basis. And those Yahuan were now of a greater age, with 2 of them already engaged to others in the Fu. Now that these 3 Tong Fong couldn't appear daily in front of Wang Yi, they had no place to enact their wiles. Wang Fei is kind to treat them so. In any other Fu, couldn't they escape holding the teapot or the drapes? Zhang Yongsu smiled and followed the topic. Yunqing Gunyang, shouldn't you thank Wang Fei? Yunqing knelt again. Newbie thanks Wang Fei. Chu Qingju looked at her and waved a hand. Stand up. I feel tired just walking. You kneel here and kneel there. If there isn't anything else, you can all leave. She was too lazy to bother with watching the drama. After the noon meal, Chu Qingju saw the sun come out from the clouds and headed to the gardens. A walk would help her digest and get some sun. There was no time that the Wang Fu's gardens would be withered. Even in this 12th month, the garden was still green and there were many blooming flowers. Many of those flowering shouldn't bloom in this season. Most likely, it was the servants who came up with ways to force the flowering. Go away, worthless scum. You can't search my body. Banxia Gunyang, I think you should return it. Otherwise, if others knew that a thief came out of here, it wouldn't be good. Walking past a flourishing wall of flowers, the place was dark and out of the way. Chu Qingju saw a young woman wearing an embroidered dress surrounded by a few yahuan and posy. Her hair was down and tangled, almost as though a physical altercation had occurred. You're the thief. I'm Wang Ye's women. How dare you search me? Also, if something went missing, why aren't you suspicious of others and only accuse me? Oh, Banxia Gunanang really believes she's a Juzi? A slightly chubby mama sneered. Just a Tong Fong, still a servant. You really believe you are one of those on top? Look at yourself in the mirror. Only you went into the room that it was placed in. Other than you, who else would have taken it? Pa. Banxia spat. It's just all of you saw that Wang Fei is favored now. So you come over to make things difficult to put yourselves in her favor. Do you think that Wang Fei would pay attention to you? Just a worthless servant pretending to be a detective. When Wang Fei falls out of favor, see who else you can curry favor with. Mu Jin, who was following behind Chu Qingju, heard this and called out icily. What act is playing here today? Such a beautiful garden. Look at what you've done. The women turned to look and their faces changed color due to fright. They quickly knelt down with a bang, leaving only the woman called Banxia standing. Chu Qingju expressionlessly examined this Banxia. She raised an eyebrow and said, What is going on? The road one picked. Even if they had to kneel, they still had to carry on to the end. That was true for Yunqing. The same was true for Banxia. When Banxia betrayed her mistress at the beginning, she had to think that this day would come. When she, as Wang Fei, was favored, there would be others that would seek favor with her through harassing a Tong Fong that wasn't a true mistress. Some choices, once made, couldn't be undone. Chu Qingju looked at the still-standing Banxia. Was she regretful now? Chapter 20. Peerless. For the first time, Chu Qingju focused on this Yahuan called Banxia. Other than her disheveled state, her appearance was rather pretty. Large eyes, curved brow. When she spoke, there were hints of 2 dimples on her cheek. She looked innocent and adorable. If it wasn't that she personally had heard the brutality she exhibited when she had just spoke, Chu Qingju would believe that she would say those things. This garden has other people. What sort of conduct is yelling and screaming? Mu Jin looked coldly over the kneeling servants and then looked at Ban Xia. Ban Xia Gunyang is very brazen. When was it that you could discuss the actions of Wang Yi and Wang Fei? When Ban Xia saw Chu Qingju, she had felt slightly afraid. But seeing Mu Jin's proud posture and remembering when they had both been Yahuan, Mu Jin had been proud because she had been most favored by Wang Fei. She couldn't bear it anymore. She was just one Yahuan of Wang Fei's entourage. How dare she lecture others? It's not Mimi who is brazen, but Mu Jin Jiejia who has become more bold. Ban Xia pushed aside the tangle of hair by her face. No wonder these lowly servants are rushing to fawn over you. It is really one person achieves immortality, dogs and chickens fly to heaven. Hearing this, Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. She held Jin Zhan's hand to sit down at a nearby stone table. She didn't want to start arguing with a Tong Fong. Ban Xia Gunyang's mouth has become sharper, but this conduct is even more shameful. Mu Jin wasn't angry and smiled thinly. Tong Fong Ban Xia disregarded the rules of the Fu, disobeyed her superiors, 30 slaps. When Mu Jin finished, one of the mamas that had been kneeling on the ground hurriedly stood and gushed. Mu Jin Gunyang, please move back a few steps. Don't let something dirty spill onto you. Finishing, she turned and gave Ban Xia a slap on the face. Wang Fei, you are evil. Another Yahuan quickly climbed up from the ground and stuffed a handkerchief into her mouth. She grabbed the tangle of hair to reveal Ban Xia's entire face to ease the way for the mama's blows. Chu Qingju started at the patterns of the stone table with half-lidded eyes. She listened to the sound of flesh being hit and used a handkerchief to wipe her hands. She drawled, "You are just a Tong Fong, but you are so arrogant. Where did you get the courage?" She raised her head and pierced Ban Xia with her gaze. Or is it that my past leniency made you forget your bounds, to dismiss protocol to the point of carelessly discussing your superiors? You might not have been born to a rich family, but you were born to a clean one. To be this disrespectful, you shame your parents. Ban Xia's mouth was stuffed, but hearing Chu Qingju mention her family, she gave a muffled protest before quieting down. That's enough. We don't want to ruin a pretty face. Chu Qingju took away her gaze. The slaps stopped. Tong Fong Ban Xia disobeyed her superiors. Her punishment is to work in the laundry rooms. Stopping there, she looked at Ban Xia. You don't have to try to find Wang Yi. I will personally tell him about this. Mu Jin glanced at Wang Fei before turning to speak to the Yahuan and Mamsa. Go help Ban Xia Gunyang pack her luggage and deliver her to the laundry room worker residence. Make sure not to burden Ban Xia Gunyang. Don't worry, Mu Jin Gunyang. We will take good care of Ban Xia Gunyang, the mama who had delivered the slap said. After bowing to Chu Qingju with the rest, she dragged the still silenced Ban Xia away. After the surroundings were clear, Jian Zhan worried started. Wang Fei, Ban Xia is a despicable person. She should be thrown out of the Fu. Why leave her untouched? Chu Qingju used her as support to stand. What kind of place is the laundry room? Beautiful women require delicate care. In that kind of place, any beauty will be worn into plainness. Will Wang Yi have any desire for her when he sees her again? A woman who attracts a man at first glance has to become more and more beautiful, not uglier with time. That was why the world had so many men who disliked their wife and favored their concubines. Women needed to raise children and manage the household. They had to support the elders above them, handle the concubines in the middle and below them. They had to raise their own or other people's children. When they were old and haggard in the end, the men will scorn them for not being desirable. She couldn't become that type of virtuous wife. Rather than satisfy a man that way, it was much better to satisfy herself instead. That's so true. In the future, when Wang Yi sees that hussy, he will only shun her and won't remember the past. In Lu ranted in a low voice, for a traitor, this is letting her off easy. Mu Jin looked at the surroundings to confirm no one else had heard In Lu's words before suggesting, Wang Fei, sitting in the shade for too long isn't healthy. Why don't we walk somewhere else? Chu Qingju nodded. Jin Zhan, go ask if Wang Yi is busy right now. If not, I will go visit Wang Yi. Jin Zhan nodded and raced forward. In another part of the garden, Zhang Yongyu looked on in disdain at Ban Xia, who was being forcefully dragged out of the garden by the others. After they were long gone, she quietly spat. Fool! The Yahuan beside her crowed. Zhuzi was right. This Ban Xia didn't have many days left to swagger. Jiang Yongyu looked at her. From the moment she betrayed her mistress, this day was going to come. It isn't that there aren't servants in other Fu like her, but none as impatient. It hasn't been a month since Wang Fei married, but she was already rushing to climb onto the bed. Receiving this outcome, it is only due to Wang Fei's kindness. Ai Lu, you have to remember. In the future, if you meet this kind of person, you have to stay far away. Those that betray their masters, they almost never have good endings. Ai Lu lowered her face and respectfully confirmed, Zhuzi, don't worry. Newbie will remember. Jiang Yongyu saw her state and nodded in satisfaction. She smiled as she watched Wang Fei walk in the direction of Wang Ye's study. Wang Fei Chu Shi Qingju was an intelligent and rational woman. In her life, she never wanted to be on the bad side of this kind of woman. Since Si Fei was already the highest she could ever achieve in this lifetime, it was better to follow this kind of person. At least her future days wouldn't be as miserable as the arrogant Feng Shi. Jiang Nan's salt governance is getting even more complicated. He closed the report in his hands and ordered his subordinate standing by the desk, get somebody to keep a watch first. Both Lao Da and Lao San's men are in there. Let the two of them brawl it out. Ben Wang doesn't want to be the villain to disturb their enthusiasm. The person standing was one of He Heng's retainers. His name was Wang Changming. His appearance was unremarkable, but he was very good at gathering information, his brain very agile, so he was a frequent visitor in front of He Heng. Wang Yi, this subordinate, has also heard from Jiang and that Rui Wang's people are putting out loans. Wang Changming furrowed his eyebrows as he reported, but it is all under other people's names, so there isn't any evidence that has been found right now. Lao San always uses and eats the best. It's natural for him to spend silver. He Heng's forefinger taped the desktop and he stated, this matter, we won't get involved in. His daily spending, the emperor sees as well. The emperor hasn't spoken, so as his elder brother, Ben Wang can't lecture him. Sometime in the future, find an opportunity to pass this into the ears of Ning Wang. It is said that the eldest brother is another father. For Lao Da to pick up this matter, it is the most appropriate. Yes, Wang Yi is wise. Wang Changming agreed. His Highness Ning Wang is of high authority and will teach His Highness Rui Wang well. The corners of He Heng's lips curled in response. He raised his head to see Ming He come in with a tray. The mirth on his face became hidden. What is it? Wang Yi, Wang Fei is outside. She said if you are not busy, she has a matter to discuss with you. Ming He looked at Wang Changmi standing to the side and lifted the tray in his hands higher. Wang Fei also said, if you are busy, you should drink some pigeon soup before working. He Heng's expression softened slightly and motioned for Ming He to put down the tray. He ordered to Wang Changming, retire for now. Wang Changming bowed and left. Coming out the door, he buried his head even deeper. A close distance from the door, he saw a dress embroidered with clouds and a hint of the pearl-embroidered yun brocade shoes peeking out. He smelt the floral scent emanating from the other, pushed his head deeper, and sketched a bow before racing away. Not looking at the black-clad man leaving, Chu Qingju saw Ming He come out to greet her and held Mu Jin's hands to enter the study. Seeing He Heng sitting at the desk partaking in the soup, she smiled and went forward. It is said that this soup is good for the brain. Wang Yi is so busy every day with government affairs, it's beneficial to have some. A few large mouthfuls were enough to finish the soup. He Heng took the handkerchief that Ming He presented to wipe his mouth. He stood to walk over to Chu Qingju and raised a hand to caress the hairpin in her hair. If I eat this and that daily, after a few years, Ben Wang will be fat. Chu Qingju moved her body back and looked up and down his body. It would be very hard for Wang Yi to get fat, but it would be great if you did get fat. Her glance was tantalizing. When Wang Yi becomes fat, there would be less beautiful women wanting to throw themselves at you. Has Wang Yi never heard about this, that if you like a person, you should use delicious food to fatten him up so nobody else will come to take him away? So my Qingju actually has such nefarious thoughts. He Heng laughed quietly and buried his face in Chu Qingju's neck to take a breath. But I do like hearing this. At least Qingju is thinking of me in her heart. Chu Qingju pulled on the jade belt at He Heng's waist with one hand and buried her head at his neck. She laughed quietly and taunted. But does Wang Ye's heart have chia? Gradually enveloping the person in his grasp, He Hung turned to sit at the nearby chair and eased Chu Qingju to sit on his leg. His palm glided across the back before resting at the waist. He smiled and kissed the smooth cheek. My heart. Qingju still can't see? Chu Qingju blinked her eyes and drew circles with a hand on He Heng's chest. Chia's eyes aren't that wondrous, to be able to see Wang Ye's heart through flesh and blood. How about Wang Yi let Chia hear it? Her head started to make its way to He Heng's chest. She laughed inside. He wanted to play the romance card. Was she a naive teenager? Ming He and Mu Jin saw the intimacy between the master and mistress and quietly retreated with the others. After the door was such, it was still possible to hear words and laughter from behind. The two exchanged a glance and mutually retreated further. The pair of Chu and he in the room wasn't doing what the servants were thinking in terms of harmonious acts. After playing for a while, they suppressed the fire that had rose. He Hung wrapped an arm around Chu Qingju's waist to let her sit more comfortably on his leg. You say that the gift of Fu Huang should be increased by 2/10 this year. This is appropriate, especially since I married this year. It didn't matter what I had given in the past, but in the future, I'm afraid I will have to trouble you. It's just an idea. If Wang Yi has no objections, I'll let them prepare. The end of the year is approaching. It's best to prepare early. Chu Qingju smiled and leaned into He Heng's embrace. Wang Yi trusting Chia like this, it is Chia's good fortune. Husband and wife are one. Why does Qingju say that? He Hung gently gathered the person he held closer, letting you take care of Ho Yuan. I have full faith in you. Chu Qingju smiled. That's great. If Chia punishes somebody, Wang Yi can't get angry. Those people are just Cheshire. They can't be seen in public. Punish away. There won't be any pity. He Hung didn't care and turned to say, Qingju's name, did it come from Luo Xinfu, where she wore shoes embroidered with delicate designs? What trailed behind was a garment as light as the mist. Chu Qingju laughed. Chia had thought that the fact the Duke of Chengde using Luo Xinfu to name his children had already spread through the city. This wasn't something to be proud of. A man using the content of a love letter to a woman to name children, that was romantic in novels, but among the nobility, that was a joke. He Hung understood the meaning in her words and warmly comforted. Qingju shouldn't think so much. In my eyes, your name is peerless, and naturally you are too. Upon hearing this, Chu Qingju couldn't resist raising her head to gaze at He Hung, a smile blooming on her face. Of course it's peerless. In the aristocracy of the entire De Long dynasty, who would choose such a crass name? That's what she thought inside. Chapter 21. A coquettish smile. When Chu Qingju walked out of the study, it was more than an hour later. She adjusted the slightly askew hairpins and narrowed her eyes to smile at the western sunset at the doorway. When she turned back, she saw the shadow of He Hung standing straight by the desk. A person in the dark, a person in the light. They always will find the other exceptionally dazzling. When He Hung raised his head, it just happened that he saw the smile and his eyes were blinded. Unexpectedly, feelings of amazement rose. He seemed to understand. A beauty melts one's heart with her coquettish smile. 1. Wang Fei. Yuzan came forward and wrapped a thin cloak around Chu Qingju. She bent to tighten the cloak. It's cold outside. Wang Fei has to take care of her body, slightly raising her chin to let Yuzan finish adjusting. Chu Qingju laughed. Yu Yahuan, are you all really thinking of me as a porcelain doll? Wang Fei has been ill recently. Newbie and the others were very worried. Even though all is well, there's still a need to be careful. Yuzan tied off the cloak and smiled as she bent in a bow. She moved to Chu Qingju's side and supported her hand. Chu Qingju shook her head in amusement and stepped onto the stone stairs. I remember I have an unfinished pouch to embroider. Let's return. Ming He watched as Wang Fei left with a herd of Yahuan. He bowed along with the other servants, calling, Wang Fei, take care. Chu Qingju stopped in her steps to turn and nodded him before continuing forward. Just this little action, it suddenly decreased the distance between Ming He and Wang Fei. The status embodied by Wang Fei. For her to nod at him, that was a great honor. He turned to look inside the study, walking to the doorway and inquired, Wang Yi, the Department of Household Affairs delivered some lamb from the northern borders. Master can have a bit of a taste. Get somebody to prepare meats and vegetables and deliver it to Zhang Yuan. Bin Wang and Wang Fei will eat hot pot together. He Hung walked to the door. He looked at Ming He before adding, a while earlier, didn't one of the Eastern Commandery official present some roe deer and other game meat? Get them to prepare it carefully. Wang Fei mentioned a few days ago she wanted to eat hot pot. With the weather now, it's a good time to do so. Nukai will go order it immediately. Ming He bowed and retreated. He sped up as he left the yard. On his way, he had to tell this to Zhang Yuan so Wang Fei wouldn't be surprised. To eat hot pot inside in the winter was a very satisfying experience. Even more so when the food were very fresh, and there was no need to worry about pesticides or loss of texture from freezing it. Picking up an authentic wild mushroom and putting it in the bowl, she dipped it into the prepared top-notch seasoning. One bite, rich and spicy, it was unspeakably enjoyable. Chu Qingju didn't like lamb, but the preparation of the lamb meat this time was very good. She could only taste the smooth and fine texture of the lamb, and there was no rank odor. The mountain chicken was tender, the shrimp succulent, and the deer and game meat that was rarely eaten in her previous life. Chu Qingju couldn't resist but eating those too. He Hung stared with shock at the disappearance of dish after dish of food. This was the first time he saw a woman who had this hearty of an appetite. He thought he had seen many different kinds of women, but seeing Chu Qingju's chopsticks wielded with such precision, speed, and strength, this kind of woman he had never encountered before. At the end, Chu Qingju swiped the mushroom on her chopsticks before swallowing and setting them down. She rinsed her hands and mouth before exclaiming, "It's been so long since I've eaten so freely. Has Chia scared Wang Yi?" He Hung had been wiping his hands. Upon hearing this, he said, "Seeing Wang Fei's appetite is this good, Bin Wang has nothing to worry about. Since you like hot pot, in the future, the kitchen should make it frequently. For Chia, hot pot isn't delicious if often eaten, but if it had been a long time, the desire will rise. The past few days, my body hadn't fully recovered, so I didn't dare eat this type of food. But now, my desire has been fulfilled." Taking a handkerchief from you, Zan to wipe her hands, Chu Qingju stood and asked He Hung, "Is Wang Yi willing to accompany Chie for a walk?" After each this much, it necessitates a walk. He Hung stood and extended a hand to Chu Qingju. "Qingju, come with me." Chu Qingju smiled as she gave her hand to the other. The other's warm palm fit perfectly around her hand. She moved slightly to let their fingers intertwine. She smiled at He Hung and remarked, "Some say, 10 fingers intertwined will live together until the hairs turn white." He Hung smiled warmly and his hand tightened around hers. The two held hands as they walked out of Zhenyuan, a long procession loudly following behind and lit up the road in the night. Chu Qingju looked regretfully at the dark sky. Summer nights are much better to look at. Even if there is no moon, there are still stars. He assumed she was a naive young girl. Then let's have some literature, discuss some moon and stars, chat about some poems and songs. Today is the 2nd of the month. Naturally, there would be no moon. But a winter moon is also very beautiful. He Hung imitated Chu Qingju's motion and lifted his head. He then turned to Chu Qingju and stated, "But it is cold on winter nights, so many have overlooked it." Chu Qingju's eyebrows moved slightly, but she was full of smiles when she looked at He Hung. Many people like bright and colorful things, like the summer's moon and stars, the spring's flowers, and the winter's plum blossoms. Chia isn't different from them and prefers the things that everybody admires. He Hung saw the smile on Chu Qingju's lips, his heart jerking slightly, and he immediately moved his gaze aside. He found that his throat was a bit itchy. He tugged the person with him to walk forwards. On the stone path, light steps sounded. The world is full of common people. I also cannot be excused from being one of them. He tilted his head to smile at Chu Qingju. The smile was gentle and skilled. It was unspeakably good-looking. Someone once said that when a man and a woman held hands and walked together, if the man always walked quickly in front, that meant that this man didn't know what was love. Chu Qingju looked at the man who had been walking alongside her and thought inside. But even when a man was forever watching the steps of a woman, it didn't mean he loved this woman. It could also mean this man was a womanizer and understood how a woman thought. The two walked for almost an hour, and when they were preparing to return, they encountered in their way Feng Zijin wearing a pale cloak. Feng Zijin looked at the clasped hands and pursed her lips. She bowed and greeted. "New greets Wang Yi, Wang Fei. It's this late. Why aren't you resting inside?" After He Hung finished speaking, he turned and took a cloak from Mu Jin's hands to wrap around Chu Qingju for her. Chu Qingju took the change to scan Feng Zijin. The other held a palace lamp imprinted with the Lady in the Moon. Behind her, there were two little Yahuan, each carrying two little baskets. "Wang Yi, the winter nights are long and Nu retires late, so an idea came to walk in the garden." Feng Zijin lowered her face. "I didn't think to encounter Wang Yi and Wang Fei." Fingers carefully manicured to a clean and round edge quickly tied the cloak. He Hung looked at the two little Yahuan behind Feng Zijin. He saw the paper boats and candles in the basket and faintly opened. "Since the winter nights are cold, then stay in the rooms. It's almost the year-end. Getting sick would be unfortunate." Nu thanks Wang Yi for his concern. Feng Zijin smiled widely. "But thinking back to when with Wang Yi, we floated paper boats. Since it is a sleepless night, I thought to float some in the lotus pond. Nu is wearing sturdy clothing, and it will only take a short while." This was having managed to find out that she and He Hung was strolling in the garden, and specially coming with tools to reminiscence about the past with He Hung. Chu Qingju curled her lips in a smile. "These boats are very well crafted, but after a night in the water, they wouldn't look pretty tomorrow morning. My suggestion, Wang Yi, you might as well get somebody to make Feng Si Fei a gold boat. No matter what happens, that wouldn't be damaged. It's just a plaything. You take it so seriously." He Hung looked at the servants carrying palace lamps. This many people with lanterns, this Feng Shi was still able to encounter them. That wasn't easy. When he teased a woman, it was his hobby. But he didn't want to see a woman take something from the past to try to curry favor. This Feng Shi was starting to act out of her bounds. "I think I've digested most of it. Let's return. The mists will be coming soon." He Hung held Chu Qingju's hand again, and looked at Feng Zijin, who had retreated to one side before he left without a hint of hesitation. Feng Zijin stared in disbelief at the back of He Hung and Chu Qingju. She didn't believe that Wang Yi would just leave. Was it that what she had done wasn't enough to stir up his memories of the past? At that moment, she saw Chu Qingju turn her head, a faint smile appearing on her face. She suddenly started, a strange cold creeping up her back. The biggest difference between men and women was that men were always best at forgetting the good of women and women was best at remembering the good of men. So when a woman interacted with a man, it couldn't always be good. If she was too good to him, he would take it for granted and forget the effort that the woman put in. To let a man remember you all the time, the first thing to do is to put yourself first all the time. If you forgot yourself, how could somebody else remember you? A few days later, Chu Qingju received a gift. It was an Ashtamangala glass lamp. When this lamp was lit at night, it was possible to see light similar to the moon and stars fall into the corners of the room. It was breathtaking. Hearing the exclamations of the servants around her, Chu Qingju smiled faintly at that Ashtamangala glass lamp hanging on its pearl-encrusted gold stand. The joy revealed through her brows was perfectly measured. Blinking her eyes, Chu Qingju pointed in a direction. "Place the lamp there." The servants carefully set the lamp in its place, but the amazement in their eyes hadn't faded. "Wang Fei, that place is good, but there's always people walking by all the time. It wouldn't end well if there was an accident." Mu Jin interjected hesitantly. "How about our storage? When Wang Fei wants to see it, Newbie will take it out. Isn't the purpose of a lamp to be used?" Chu Qingju smiled as she watched the floating dots of light. "I very much like this lamp. It would be a pity for it not to be here to gaze at." Newbie understands. Mu Jin didn't continue and docilely stood being Chu Qingju. Her attitude was respectful yet didn't emanate flattery. The story of how Wang Yi gave Wang Fei a valuable Ashmangala glass lamp quickly spread through the entire Wang Fu. The servants who had saw the lamp, when they spoke of it, it was as though it was their own. Their eyes danced and they rehashed with great pleasure. Feng Zijin smashed many things in her own rooms. She wanted to burst into the Zhengyuan and smash that lamp. Chu Qingju, that whore. It was just a lamp. Did she have to let the servants spread it to the entire Fu? as though it was that marvelous. After smashing another piece of porcelain, Feng Zijin panted as she looked at the Yahuan by the door and snarled, "What is it?" The little Yahuan shrunk into herself before carefully announcing, "Mistress, Wang Fei has invited you to Zhenyu." Feng Zijin's face darkened. She then wiped at the loose strands of hair by the face. "Send someone in to serve me." She just wanted to go see what ploy that whore had cooked up again. Chapter 22. To cause ruin, the door to Zhengyuan was on the same line as the door to the Wangfu itself. This was showing that the person living in Zhenyuan was the owner of the fu. The other concubines, including Tong Fong, were spread out in 2 side yards between the second and the third door. The guardsmen, manservants, and married servants resided outside the ermine. The rules of the Wangfu were strictly enforced. The area that a person could move in was clearly divided. For the servants, to be one that could walk inside the second door to serve, that made them a rank higher than the average servant as they were serving the inner courtyard. Even if it was just sweeping the ground, it was still a duty that many competed for. So it could be seen that Chu Qingju, who lived in Zhenyuan and had the power over Hoyuan, was an existence that could not be defied. Wang Fei, Zhang Fei, Luo Yinyang, and Han Yinyang have arrived, Yuzan announced from the door. Chu Qingju sat on the armchair where a thick blanket had been laid down. She laid down halfway on the back, her hands holding a pearl-encrusted hand warmer. Hearing Yuzan's announcement, her eyebrow rose. "It's cold outside in the outer hall. Invite them in." Yuzan bowed and silently retreated. A short while later, 3 different beauties walked into the rooms. After they obediently greeted Chu Qingju allowed them to sit. She drawled, "Just now I had somebody organize my personal stores. I found some good cloth and called you here to let you pick and make some new clothes." Finishing, she tilted her head to look at Mu Jin. Mu Jin motioned for the Yahuan to present the bolts. The cloth was actually of good quality, even though it couldn't rival yun and shu brocade, but it still was expensive. Of the 3 sitting, Jiang Yongyu held the highest rank. She looked at the large heap of cloth on the table and couldn't help but stand to say, "Wang Fei, we can't do this. The Fu has already sent over cloth for us. How can we take yours? There's so much even I can't wear it all. If it stays, the color will fade." Chu Qingju looked at the cloths. These had come from Changdagong Fu who had, to not shame themselves, used them as several chests of dowry. There was a lot of it, but even 10 bolts of these cloths couldn't compare to the price of 1 bolt of shu brocade. "Seeing you wear it, it will brighten my eyes. If it was left at the bottom of the chest, wouldn't it be a waste?" Hearing this, Jiang Yongyu smiled and bowed to Chu Qingju. "Newbie thanks Wang Fei for her generosity." Finishing, she pointed at 2 bolts of umber cloth. "Then I'll take these 2 bolts first." Chu Qingju looked at the 2 bolts of brocade and commented, "Those 2 are very nice. Mu Jin, give those 2 bolts of sapphire blue to Jiang Fei as well. Jiang Fei's skin is pale. The sapphire blue will show her off best." Jiang Yongju remarked that Wang Fei was teasing her but didn't refuse. The other 2 Shirchia picked a bolt each. Chu Qingju picked a bolt for each of them. The mood in the room started to become lively. The 3 had the desire to ingratiate themselves, and their implied compliments flowed. They weren't debasing themselves, but it was possible to detect their respect. "I had wanted to make a girdle dress, but the color wasn't right. These lotus-colored brocade that Wang Fei picked for new. It will satisfy Nu's wishes." Han Qing he caressed a bolt of lotus brocade with joy. "This color is also good for making pouches." Hear that? It's as though she got the best. Jiang Yongyu chuckled and looked at Chu Qingju who sat above her. "It is Wang Fei who has spoiled them to the point of no return. Jiang Fei is making fun of us. Nu saw that when you were picking, your face was happy too." Han Qing he laughed. "And now you come to tease Nu. So that's what is creating the fuss. Everybody is picking good things here." Feng Zijin could hear from outside the door how these women were flattering Chu Qingju. When she came in, she saw the bolts that the Yahuan behind each Cheshire were holding. The table still had some as well. She came and bent slightly to Chu Qingju. "Nu is late. Is there anything good left over?" Chu Qingju placed the hand warmer to one side and grasped the Timu Jin presented for a drink. With good humor, she looked at Feng Zijin. I had thought that Feng Fei wouldn't come. Take what you like. Feng Zijin casually swept the pile. Nu likes that bolt. Is Wang Fei willing to part with it? Everybody looked and found the Feng Zijin was pointed at a pomegranate red bolt. Instantly, their expressions differed. Pomegranate red wasn't true red, but it was already a vibrant shade of red. Feng Shi was a seashore. She wasn't allowed to wear red. Was she challenging Wang Fei? The smile on Chu Qingju's face grew warmer. I had thought that, based on Feng Fei's looks, the blue color suits you better. But since you like it, then take it. I have too much red brocade already. It hurts my eyes to look at it. Finishing, she said to Mu Jin, send the remainders to Feng Fei's rooms. Don't worry, Wang Fei. Newbie will certainly send somebody to deliver it. Mu Jin bent in a bow and started directing for the cloth to be gathered and delivered to Feng Fei's rooms. Zhang Yongyu held a smile in the corner of her lips. She kept her head down as she drank fine, snow falling on the pool, T1. Upon hearing Wang Fei's words, her thin fingers slightly curled. She placed down the cup, and out of the corner of her mouth, she said to Feng Jizin, Mimi is too brash. You might like the pomegranate, but I don't think it matches you. Han Qing he heard Jiang Yongyu clearly stating her side and narrowed her eyes at Jiang Yongyu. She added, Nu thinks Feng Fei isn't fit for the pomegranate at all. A seashore who wanted to wear red. What sort of daydream was that? Did she think Wang Yi was an imbecile who would disregard protocol? Feng Zijin's face turned ugly. When Jiang Yongyu spoke, she already felt annoyed. Seeing Han Qing he, a Shirchia, dare speak to her, she lectured, You are a Shirchia. Is there a place for you to speak here? Feng Fei assumes too much. Whether Nu can speak or not, that's Wang Fei's decision, not yours. Han Qing he mocked. Unless Feng Fei thinks she is capable of making Wang Fei's decisions for her. Shut up. What nonsense are you speaking? Feng Zijin's family was somewhat well off. She didn't really care about the cloth. She was annoyed at how Chu Qingju had treated her. Seeing that Han Qinghe, a Shirchia from a lousy family, dare mock her, she shouted furiously, Who let you remark on my affairs? In her anger, Feng Zijin had forgotten that Chu Qingju's personality wasn't like before. What she had done, it was disregarding her superiors, disregarding protocol. Han Qing he heard the disdain in Feng Jizin's speech for her birth and anger rose. Her expression became more respectful, her smile even warmer. Feng Fei, don't be angry. Nu is just stating the truth. You. Feng Zijin stepped forward in anger. Somehow, she stepped on the hem of her dress, and with a high shriek, she fell down. The instant she fell to the floor, she seemed to hear the clear sound of something braying. Before she could see what she had bumped into, she heard a multitude of inhales, and then there was a room full of silence. She grabbed the hand of a Yahuan to lever herself up and saw a glass lamp smashed on the floor. The little pearls that had been encrusted rolled away to the side. The jewels and pearls that had been on the corners had fallen off. As to whether the body of the lamp had cracked, nobody knew. Heavens! This is the Ashtamangala glass lamp that Wang Yi specially found the craftsman to make for Wang Fei. Han Qing he exclaimed before closing her mouth, her face flustered. By this time, no matter how dumb Feng Zijin was, she knew that something was astray. Her body froze and she knelt with a bang. Wang Fei, Nu didn't mean to. Please investigate clearly. Everybody carefully peeked at Wang Fei's expression. They found her face was frozen, almost as though she still hadn't recovered. Instantly, the hearts of those present started to tremble. Everybody in the Fu knew how much Wang Fei liked this lamp. Wang Yi had been flush with joy. Now that the lamp was damaged, nobody knew how furious Wang Fei would get. If Wang Fei was unhappy, Wang Yi would naturally be angry. Wang Fei, cold sweat started to form on Feng Zijin's palm. She didn't understand. How was it that she just couldn't control herself, that she would fall directly onto the lamp? You can all leave. Chu Qingju stood and looked tiredly at Feng Zijin. I knew before that you had been unhappy with me. In the past, I thought you were proud, but you were not cruel. I didn't think you would be like this. Yes, it was too much of a coincidence. She didn't hit anything else, but she managed to directly bump into the token of love that Wang Yi gave to Wang Fei. It was jealousy. A little Si Fei could be arrogant and demanding, but she had to disregard Wang Fei. It was a major overstep. Wasn't she just riding on the fact that Wang Fei had never punished her before? The people inside watched as Wang Fei dazedly returned to her inner rooms. They all paused for a beat before carefully picking up the Ashtamangala glass lamp and found that the lamp had already cracked. Such an exquisite work of art. A pity. Jiang Yongyu sighed. Let us leave. Wang Fei is probably not in a good mood now. We shouldn't disturb her. Finishing, she took the two Shirchia with her. Feng Zijin dazedly stood and dizzily leaned on the Yahuan's hand to walk back to her rooms. The terror in her heart grew larger and larger. She didn't know what to do. Everybody had seen her bump into the lamp. She didn't even have any leeway to explain. In another set of rooms, Jiang Yongyu heard that Feng Zijin had already returned to her own rooms. She instantly sneered. She's a moron. Anybody with brains would be kneeling in front of the Zhen Yuan to beg for forgiveness. At least, when Wang Yi knew of the incident, his rage would lessen slightly. Now that she had retreated into her own rooms, wasn't that provoking Wang Yi even more? Han Qinghe sat opposite her and smiled upon hearing this. In the past, she depended on the fact she had the highest birth of the entire Hoyuan and was favored by Wang Yi. She harassed everybody. She didn't even treat you, who has the same status, as an equal. It isn't strange that she is a simpleton. You weren't very polite today to her. Jiang Yongyu eyes Han Qinghe. Han Shirchia has this side. I was fooled in the past. Jiang Si Fei is nimble-minded and has never just wronged before. Han Qinghe smiled and rose to bow to Jiang Yongyu. Nu is just going with the flow. I learned this from Si Fei, so Nu has to thank you. Jiang Yongyu jerked her lips and said flatly, Han Shirchia doesn't have to be so polite. I just want to have an easy life. You and I are water of the well and water of the river. There's no need for pleasantries. Han Qinghe snorted and bowed again. If that is so, Nu will bid farewell. I won't bother seeing you out. Jiang Yongyu tilted her head and watched the figure of Han Qinghe disappear outside the door. A beat later, Ai Lu opened. Mistress, what did Han Shirchia mean? She is just displaying her loyalty to Wang Fei and feeling me out. Jiang Yongyu snorted. Just wait. Tomorrow there will be something for that Feng Si Fei to worry about. If the heavens wish for one's death, it will first allow for one's madness. Jiang Yongyu stood. She's been mad for too long. She forgot her own identity. It isn't undeserved that Wang Fei is going to sort her out. Ai Lu wanted to ask that if it was clearly Feng Si Fei who kept on provoking which created the disaster, but why would it turn out to be Wang Fei sorting out Feng Si Fei? But seeing her mistress remain silent, she docilely closed her mouth. 1. It is a type of flower tea originating from Imei Mountain /N. Chapter 23 Pleading Feng Si Fei was arrogant and villainous. She broke the Ashmangala glass lamp Wang Yi gave to Wang Fei. The news spread like fire through the entire Fu. The people who disliked Feng Si Fei felt a vicious satisfaction and waited to see her misfortunes continue. But who knew on the second day that the Zheng Yuan didn't make any moves? Wang Fei didn't even send out any words of admonishment. Those servants that had been offended by Feng Zijin were disappointed. Was the incident going to be covered up like this? Another 2 days passed, and just when the rumors were starting to settle, members of the Feng family came to the Fu. Feng Si Fei's father was a third-grade assistant minister in the Department of Works. Relatively speaking, this wasn't a very important position in the city of Jing. Moreover, it was in the Department of Works and not an important department such as the rights or revenue. Before the Feng family's card could be passed into Zhengyuan, it was blocked by Wang Ye's people. They only said that the Fu was temporarily not receiving any visitors. The Feng family didn't even get to meet Wang Yi and Wang Fei. They didn't even manage to leave behind their gifts before they were thrown out. The Fu became lively again. Wang Yi was very rude to the Feng family. Did it mean that he was very discontent with Feng Si Fei? Before everybody could react, Feng Si Fei was moved to a small set of room in the western corner of the Wang Fu. Her allowances were all halved. Even though she still called a Si Fei, her allowances were no different than any other Shirchia. Instantly, the news came out that Wang Yi wanted to demote Feng Si Fei to a shirchia. The title of Si Fei, it was just a pretty-sounding title. In the most basic terms, it was just a yin-yang of somewhat good birth. The only one of Wang Ye's women that could enter the genealogy book of the imperial family was Wang Fei and no one else. Today, Wang Yi could let the servants call you Si Fei. Tomorrow, he could let the servants call another person Si Fei. No matter how noble this Si sure was, it couldn't measure up to half a hand of the D wife. In the Zhongyuan, Chu Qingju looked at the box that He Hong had personally presented and then looked suspiciously at He Hong. Wang Yi, what good thing is in this box, that you have to taunt Xie with it? He Hong pointed to the door and windows and ordered the servants. Close the door and windows, make the room darker. Because of the weather in the winter, the rooms were already darker than in other seasons. Once the openings were closed, the room instantly plunged into a darkness that was hard to adjust to. Open and take a look. He Hong smiled at Chu Qingju and hinted to her to open the box. Chu Qingju smiled at He Hong. Her forefinger caressed the lid for a while, and under He Hong's expectant gaze, she opened the box. The moment the box was opened, a warm light streamed out of the box, illuminating the entire room. Her finger stopped moving. Chu Qingju's eyes slightly widened. Inside the box was a mutton-fat jade lamp. The base of the lamp was a Qing Luan bird holding a lotus in its beak. Both the center of the lotus and the wings of the Qing Luan were glowing. Chu Qingju looked awestruck at this lamp. That stone, the size of an infant's fist, sitting in the middle of the lotus, was that a night luminous pearl? 1. And the thumb-sized beads encrusted on the wings, were they night luminous pearls too? And the base of this lamp clearly was carved from a single piece of jade. How big was the original for the product to be like this? The lotus flower wasn't small. Its weight almost surpassed the base of the lamp. So how did it maintain balance with the lamp base? Even though the luminous pearl's light was gentle, but on this lamp, Chu Qingju could only see the radiance of the Teheo, too. The ancient people had endless imagination and creativity. In this instant, a certain dumb hick from the modern times knelt under this great culture. The glass lamp before had exquisite workmanship, but Chu Qingju had been used to the different glass products of the modern age and wasn't amazed to this point. Today, with this night luminous pearl, the only thing she could do was worship it. Seeing Chu Qingju's awestruck face, He Hong smiled and informed her, "This lamp was bestowed to me by Fu Huang when I moved out of the palace 2 years ago to start my own fu. Supposedly, it was the masterpiece of a master craftsman 100 years ago. This might not be as beautiful as the light of the moon and stars, but the carving on this jade lamp is passable. It will be suitable for you to use when you sleep." The servants in the room were already dumbfounded. A night luminous pearl, it was already a valuable artifact. This lamp, it was worth entire cities. Wang Yi really did place great importance on Wang Fei. In the myths, Qing Luan is the messenger bird of good news besides the heavenly empress. They say that the Qing Luan is a romantic bird. It spends its entire life searching for the one. Chu Qingju's face, under the gentle light, seemed exceptionally warm. Her eyes seemed to have been infected with the light from the pearl. Meeting Wang Yi is the greatest fortune of Xie's life. He Hong slightly lowered his head, not looking at that luminous pair of eyes. He said softly, "It's just an object. If Qingju likes it, it has fulfilled its highest duty." Touching the warm wings of the Qing Luan, Chu Qingju's fingers stopped on the night luminous pearl embedded in the wings. Wang Ye's kindness, Xie knows. But this is too valuable. No matter how valuable an object is, it doesn't compare to Qingju's place in my heart. He Hong took her hand in his. "Don't think so much. It's all right for you to just like it." Returning the Qing Luan lotus lamp back into the box, the rooms became dusky again. He Hong saw that Chu Qingju seemed to be in a daze, staring at him, and his grasp tightened. The servants reopened the door and windows. Light came into the room. He Hong released Chu Qingju's hand. Earlier, a decree came from the palace. "I have been summoned to enter in a little while. I'll probably return late. You don't have to wait up for me." "Yes," Chu Qingju nodded with a smile. She stood and carefully placed the box to one side. "If that's going to happen, we should prepare early. If you are late, it might cause Fu Huang to dislike you." He Hung nodded and held Chu Qingju's hand again before leaving the Zheng Yuan with his entourage. Chu Qingju saw the back of his figure disappear at the door and expressionlessly returned to sit on the armchair. Mu Jin, place this lamp in my bedroom. Take care placing it to avoid any accidents. Regardless of He Heng's intentions, she liked this lamp, so it should be placed somewhere to be admired. The rooms of the mistress of the Wang Fu were not a place anyone could enter. Mu Jin nodded and carefully held the box as she walked inside in fear of damaging it. A short amount of time later, when Chu Qingju had just finished a cup of tea, she saw Huang Yang quickly walk in. Wang Fei, Feng Si Fei is kneeling at the gates to beg for forgiveness. Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. She came to beg forgiveness? Ruminating for a while, she asked, Did Wang Yi leave the Fu yet? Just left. Huang Yang thought a bit. Feng Si Fei is wearing plain clothes. She says she is truly regretful and begs Wang Fei to forgive her. Such a good show, but the intended audience isn't here. Chu Qingju chuckled and stood. I do wish to see how she is truly regretful. Draping on a fox-skin cape, Chu Qingju took with her a group of high and low-ranked servants as she walked to the gate. She saw Feng Jizin dressed in black and kneeling with a small Yahuan. Maybe it was that the clothes weren't thick enough. Her face was also slightly dark. When she came out, a few flickers of regret appeared on Feng Zijin's dark face, and she gave a heavy kowtow. Nu was ignorant and made a great error and begs for forgiveness from Wang Fei. Feng Si Fei, what are you doing? Chu Qingju walked to the top of the stairs at the gate. She calmly looked at Feng Zijin's state. I have never done anything to Feng Si Fei. What is the meaning of your actions? Wang Fei, please forgive Nu. In the past, Nu was disrespectful. Nu didn't know her bounds. Feng Zijin gave a few more kowtows and then crawled in front of Chu Qingju. Wang Fei, please persuade Wang Yi. Don't demote Nu. Please, Wang Fei, help say something on behalf of Nu. Chu Qingju just saw that. In the span of a few days, Feng Zijin had become haggard, her eyes bloodshot. There was no sign of the liveliness and arrogance in the previous few days. In the past, this person carried herself as though she was on top of the world. Did she ever think that a day like this would happen? However, He Heng was actually going to demote her from Si Fei to Yin Yang. Was this telling everybody that in this Wang Fu, other than him as Wang Yi, there was only her as Wang Fei who was one of the owners of this Wang Fu? She had already known He Heng was a smart and sensible person. Otherwise, he couldn't act so decisively. To purposefully let Feng Zijin find out, wasn't it just to make sure this scene would happen? That man wanted her to release her anger and letting everybody in the city know how much he, Duan Wang, respected his wife and how correct his conduct was. His title was Duan 3. Based on appearances, it fit him well. Lowering her eyes to look at the person continuously kowtowing to her, Chu Qingju slowly asked, Feng Shi, who do you think I am? Feng Zijin paused and stopped kowtowing. She raised her head to dazedly gaze upon this woman she had never really placed any importance on. I am the mistress of Duan Wang Fu, Wang Yezdi wife. Chu Qingju bent at the waist and used a hand to lift Feng Zijin's chin. But why do you always forget this fact? Feng Zijin suddenly widened her eyes. She remembered when Chu Qingju had humiliated her before by lifting her chin. At that time, she had been enraged and felt humiliation. But now, she felt a coldness seep into her entire body. This woman in front of her wasn't a harmless bunny. She was a seductive fox demoness, a poisonous scorpion. Chu Qingju laughed in satisfaction as she saw Feng Zijin start to tremble. She slowly straightened and using a handkerchief one by one, she wiped her fingers. I remember when I just got very sick. I vaguely heard you say outside. It was annoying to waver between life and death. Feng Zijin's trembling became more severe. Even her teeth started chattering. I didn't die. How can I receive your pleas? The smile on Chu Qingju's mouth was so gentle it seemed to be made up of water. She exclaimed, Feng Si Fei, what are you doing? It's so cold on the ground. Wang Yi always makes his own decisions. You have made it difficult for me too. Feng Zijin's terror reached its peak and turned to rage. Before she could start swearing, Yin Lu covered her mouth. Oh, I had forgotten. The Feng family does have some influence. Presumably, the family teachings are strict. Do your cousins have the same lively personality that you have? Feng Zijin instantly stopped and sank powerlessly to sit on the ground. She looked dazedly at the smiling Chu Qingju and muttered in a low voice, "You want to coerce me?" Hearing this, Chu Qingju used her handkerchief to muffle the laughter coming out of her mouth. Feng Si Fei, don't joke. Us inner chamber women, the most important part of us is our reputation. Matters outside, they aren't easy to deal with, and meddling is an embarrassment. Feng Zijin opened her mouth but could say anything. She didn't understand. She was the most favored Si Fei. How could she end up like this? Didn't Wang Yi not like Wang Fei? Why was it like this? Chu Qingju kept a faint smile as she watched Feng Zijin leave, aided by the support of the servants. The smile gradually faded at Chu Qingju's lips, and she looked coldly at the back of the figure, not a hint of warmth to be found. A type of volcanic stone, usually fluorite. The stone glows in the dark, which was the origin of the word fluorescence. It was used for decoration, too, a word similar to nouveau riche, but the Chinese term has gradually penetrated the international culture. See Wikipedia for the phenomenon. 3. See Chapter 1 or glossary for definition of Duan /end. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.